I declare open this council meeting of the Colac Otway Shire Council on the 23rd of February 2022. Almighty God, we seek your blessing and guidance in our deliberations on behalf of the people of the Colac Otway Shire. Enable this council's decision to be those that contribute to the true welfare and betterment of our community. I would like to start this afternoon by acknowledging the traditional custodians and lawmakers of this land, their elders past and present, and welcome any descendants here today. I would like to advise that all council meetings are recorded and live streamed, with the exception of confidential matters. This includes the public participation sections of meetings. The live stream recording of this afternoon's meeting will be available on the website as soon as practical. By participating in open meetings, individuals consent to the use and disclosure of the information they share at the meeting, including any personal and/or sensitive information. Please note that it is an offence to make an unauthorised recording of the meeting. Can I ask that council staff record all those present today? Okay, note we've got nil apologies or leave of absences. Okay, now moving on to question time. Colac Otway Shire Council encourages community input, and integral to this is the opportunity provided to ask questions at council meetings. A maximum of 30 minutes is allowed for question time. Community members wishing to ask questions of council by video conference were requested to register their intention to do so before 5 p.m. on Monday the 21st of February 2022. No questions were received. I have received questions in writing from Mr James Judd, Mr Justin Mason, Mr Nasser Cobb, Miss Leonora Coolhouse, Ms Mary Drackup and Mr Prabhakati. Each question received will be read out and a response will be provided by the relevant member of the Executive Management Team. Responses will be provided in writing following the meeting. Okay, I know Mr Judd is here. Okay, questions submitted in writing from Mr Judd. When is the Colac Otway Shire Council going to hold an urgent review of all proposed development options under the Colac 2050 growth plan that makes certain all drainage and access will be able to handle a once in 100 year storm now that it is out from official channels that these events will occur at far more frequent intervals in all future years? Response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor, Council does not plan to revisit the Colac 2050 growth plan. The flood and drainage studies undertaken for Colac in recent years modelled future impacts of flooding. Residential growth areas identified in the growth plan took this modelling into account. Future development will take account of flood-prone areas and include flood mitigation measures where appropriate to ensure that development is flood-free.
Thank you. Question 2. While we hear the Kolak regions is advancing, when will the Colac Otway Shire Council give a definite answer if the required open space and playing fields needed if the Colac 2050 growth plan is introduced will actually be provided in a usable state by the time the plan is due to be introduced? Response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor. Open space, recreation and sporting facilities required to support Colac's growing population will be enhanced and expanded as required through future land development. Usable open space will be provided within new subdivisions where appropriate, and cash contributions required in other circumstances to embellish existing open space elsewhere. Future land developers will also make financial contributions towards the provision of new sporting facilities to meet the needs of new residents.
Question 3. To settle proceedings commenced by the Colac Otway Shire Council prior to a court decision being handed down in Council's favour, what was the total legal fees paid by or on behalf of the Colac Otway Shire Council in the 2020-21 financial year? Response from General Manager, Corporate Services.
Thank you for the question, Mr Judd. Specific to Mr Judd's question, Colac Otway Shire did not incur any legal fees as a result of proceedings commenced and settled prior to a court decision in the 2020-21 financial year. Total legal costs for the Colac Otway Shire in the 2021 financial year were $153,000, including reviewing legal documents, providing professional advice or opinion, and other governance matters.
Okay, question 4. How much money did it cost the ratepayers and others of the Colac Otway Shire Council to send contaminated loads of recycling material to landfill in the 2020-21 financial year, since contamination of loads by broken glass was not the user's fault, but the fault of the Colac Otway Shire Council for allowing lids to remain on bins after council had prohibited items being put in this bin, when the lids specifically state that glass bottles and jars are permitted in this bin, the property of the Colac Otway Shire. When council officers have a very long history of blasting the community at council meetings for doing the wrong thing and costing council money, as loads cannot be sold and you have to pay a landfill levy. Response from General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through the Mayor, Council has not been charged for contamination in co-mingled recycling during the 2021 financial year, nor did any loads of recycling materials end up in landfill. Glass has, up until recently, formed a component of our co-mingled collection stream. Contamination rates within this stream have been minimal, with the inclusion of glass and readily accepted by our recycling processor. With the fourth curbside collection service for glass, where we are seeing month on month greater volumes of glass and a more consistent and cleaner recycling stream.
Thank you. Final question. In a critical period of the year for people to enjoy the water, why did it take the Colac Otway Shire Council over 3 weeks to release a report that water in Lake Kolak was not safe for swimming, when this period included a number of hot days? Response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor. Council undertakes a regular monitoring program for water quality in Lake Kolak over the summer months, and took the decision to install signage discouraging swimming in the lake based on results from this testing.
Thank you. Is Mr Justin Mason in the gallery? No. He will receive a written response to his questions. Mr Nasser Cobb? No. Leonora Coolhouse from Forest? No. Mary Dracup? Oh, yes, from Forest. Okay, question 1. In 2021, Colac Otway Shire joined other councils leading the way in achieving carbon neutrality for their council's own operations. I note that many neighbouring councils have also now stated higher ambitions in setting municipal-wide targets for net zero emissions, that is, reaching beyond just their council operations to the whole community. For example, Golden Plains by 2040, Geelong by 2035, Warrnambool by 2040, Ballarat by 2050. When will the Colac Otway Shire set its municipal-wide community targets for achieving net zero emissions? Response from General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through the Mayor, Council has not resolved anything in relation to this issue. However, we are in the process of developing our new environment strategy.
Thank you. I note Mr Pravakutty is in the gallery. Mr Cutty has submitted a number of questions in relation to Council's decision not to become a founding member of the Barwon South Alliance, which was at the Council meeting on the August the 21st, August 2021 meeting. The questions have been directed to an individual councillor, so in accordance with clause 52(12.5) of council governance rules, I have determined to disallow the questions as they seek the views of a particular councillor and are not questions to the council. The contact details of all individual councillors are publicly available, and I would encourage people to contact individual councillors directly if they want to discuss such matters. I would also like to advise that debate in relation to the Barwon South Alliance. Matter can be viewed as part of the live stream recording on Council's website, and also a decision regarding whether Council joins the Barwon South West Climate Alliance is coming up at a Council meeting in the future. I'll now take questions from the floor. If you'd like to raise your hand if anybody has any questions. I know Mr Cutty has raised his hand and Mr Tony Webber has, but I might ask Mr Cutty to come up to the floor, state your name and will we know your name? Thank you.
Just in relation to the particular BSW Alliance and communicating with by email. Now, you're aware, and I think I did an email to all councillors shortly after the meeting, explaining why I was puzzled with the decision and gave various reasons for that. And I sought from all the councillors, in the true spirit of community engagement, to perhaps let me know why they felt this decision was correct. And I would have expected that Councillor McCracken would have, as part of that process, engaged with the committee in accordance with the Council's engagement policies. Now, of the councillors who had voted not to join the alliance, only one councillor, Councillor Potter, responded, and I thank him for that. And he's the only one who had the decency to respond to me. And none of the others, and that includes you, Mayor, did have the decency to not even acknowledge my email, let alone answer it. Now, in regard to the issue, the policy that the governance rules that you've made, that councillors don't answer these questions, Council, like the local laws in that's there in the Local Government Act, it says that you cannot make any laws that contravene the provisions of the Act, and the Act provides for accountability and transparency. In this particular instance, there's a specific reason why I've asked Councillor McCracken to answer the question, and that is because it was his decision. It's in relation to a councillor's decision. He's the only one who will know what was going on in his head and in the reasonings that he went through to finally come up with the decision to put forward the motion. So okay, he's the only one who's in a position to do that.
So do you have a question, a general question, not a question directed at a councillor?
Well, I can ask the council in relation to, more broadly, in relation to that. So am I to seek a separate response from Councillor McCracken in relation to that? I think the best thing
for you to do, if you've got specific questions of a councillor, is to get in contact with that councillor either via email or via phone. And I think Councillor McCracken's indicated that he would be happy to have a chat with you, catch up for a coffee.
Can I respond?
Sure.
Just quickly, I don't recall receiving your email, but I appreciate that it might have been sent, and I'm not sure why I didn't receive it, but I'm happy to catch up with you whenever it is mutually convenient. We can have a discussion or whatever the case might be.
Yep. So my concern was in relation to the decision was that it's going to, I'm not, by the way, locked into the BWS Alliance, provided someone can demonstrate that overwhelmingly that there is another way we can do something, but there's no evidence of anything that's there. So I'm happy to then, since this is the way the process is, to communicate with Councillor McCracken, and hopefully there will be some answer in relation to that. I note that the final decision has not been made in relation to the joining of the Alliance, and I hope to communicate with all the councillors in relation to that at a later stage.
Okay, thank you. Mr Webber.
Tony Webber, Otway Forum. In the years past, we've had a Chief Executive Officer's report at the beginning of the Council agenda. At each new Chief Executive Officer, I have asked the question if we can reinstate that. It was very informative, a rundown of what had happened in the last month at Colac Otway.
Thank you for your question through the Mayor. I don't have an intention at this time to introduce a monthly report, but I would encourage the community to read the CEO's update and report, which is actually in tonight's agenda in the forward of the quarterly performance report. And I think that you might find that whilst it's quarterly, not monthly, it may contain some really interesting information.
Thank you. The second question is about the Apollo Bay Beacon. Now, it's in three parts. Do you have funding to reinstate the beacon? Will it be on the same structure as the last one? And will there be community consultation?
Okay, I just might ask for a response from the General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through the Mayor, thank you for the question. So just to fill people in who might not be aware, this was a redundant navigation aid. It's of timber construction. It was removed. We still have in our possession the timber components that it consisted of. It's our intention to reinstate this timber structure, but to do it in such a way that it doesn't cause any confusion to maritime users. We will be able to do that with existing staff, and so there won't be any cost impact of that reinstatement.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Webber. Are there any other questions from the gallery?
Sorry, Mayor. I think Tony's third point was about community consultation in the question.
Through the Mayor, yeah, apologies. I had neglected to answer that section. We certainly had a number of community members make representations to us about the structure. We had also consulted with the Apollo Bay Harbour User Group about that. We don't intend to do any further consultation, since all we're proposing to do is to reinstate a timber structure that has existed for a long period of time.
Are there any other questions from the gallery? No. All right. If there's no further questions for the gallery, I think in the interest that we have sort of got 10 minutes left of question time, I will read out just some of the questions that we've got left from people that aren't here in the gallery, but they might be watching online. Okay, we've got questions from Mr. Justin Mason, Berrygara. Does Council intend to grant a lease to the Forest Caravan Park while the park is still non-compliant? Response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor, Council is working with the EPA to upgrade the wastewater facilities at Forest Caravan Park. The Forest Caravan Park is able to continue operating whilst the EPA review upgrade plans.
Thank you. Question 2. In 2020, Council announced a new wastewater treatment plant for the Forest Caravan Park and that there was $250,000 in the budget to complete the works. What has happened to the funds allocated? Response from General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through the Mayor, funding for the Forest Caravan Park wastewater upgrade project is currently allocated in Council's current budget. Some of these funds have been spent to date on the wastewater system design and project management costs. The balance will be retained for the upgrade when it has received EPA approval.
Question 3. The EOI process for the Forest Caravan Park was extended numerous times after the advertised closing date. Why was this, and how many other EOIs within the same time frame were extended? Response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor, as described in the key information of today's agenda item 10.2, the submission deadline for Forest Caravan Park expression of interest was extended twice due to COVID restrictions preventing site visits, and at the reasonable request of potential proponents. It is not unusual for EOIs or tender deadlines to be extended or reopened if circumstances require it.
Thank you. Question 4. Is Council going to change the plans for the wastewater treatment plant that were advertised and designed at great expense to the ratepayers of the Shire? Response from General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through the Mayor, there are no plans to change the wastewater treatment system design for the Forest Caravan Park. Council is seeking approval from the EPA prior to commissioning the construction of the works.
Okay, questions from Mr Nassacob Forest. The current contract of the Forest Caravan Park lease stipulates loosely 4 times a year of overflow of visitors into the common. This has been problematic and illustrated lack of foresight among those involved in drawing the contract. The proposed lease suggests the overflow into the common to be the total of 41 days spread over 8 separate times per year. Considering the limited capacity of on-site toilets and amenities, did the council specify the limits on numbers of visitors allowed per each day of overflow, or the 250 patrons cap apply? Response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor. As per clause 2.3.4 of the invitation for expression of interest attached to today's agenda item 10.2, once the Forest Caravan Park wastewater upgrade project is complete, the maximum patron capacity for the site will be approximately 264 patrons, inclusive of the Forest Common area.
Thank you. Question 1.2. What are the policies, procedures instituted in the lease contract to guarantee that the caravan park leased area must be 100% full before the overflow area is offered to customers? Response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor, terms of the Forest Common use will form a clause in the lease agreement and managed appropriately through the management of the lease.
Thank you. Question 1.3. Will the Council publish on its website the actual outcome of the community consultation produced by the Council, not the summarised version, but the actual people's opinions as provided by Council? Response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor, de-identified results of community consultation regarding the future of Forest Caravan Park were published in the 24 June 2021 Council meeting agenda, which can be accessed via Council's website.
Thank you. And final questions from Leonora Coolhouse Forest. It is now known that methane emissions from gas warm our climate 83% faster than carbon dioxide in the short term. As well, we know that gas burned in our homes and public spaces can have serious health consequences, contributing to asthma, some cancers and reproductive health concerns. The pressure is on. Victoria needs to switch off the gas in the coming decade, and local governments have a powerful role to play in the transition towards electrification and the necessary switch away from gas. Council has proudly shared with the community its recent achievement of carbon neutrality in its operations. Just getting blue water off gas is thought to have reduced 8 to 10% of the Council's total corporate emissions for the Shire. Council meeting agenda 28th of April 2021. There is more to do. In relation to Council facilities, will Council take action to transition all gas appliances that are at the end of their useful life and replace them with renewable powered electric appliances? Response from General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through the Mayor, when major gas-powered appliances reach the end of their useful life, Council will evaluate all options for providing the required service.
Question 2. Will Council take action to ensure that an amendment to the planning scheme, if drafted in order to ban new gas connections across the municipality? Response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor, there are no plans at present to undertake an amendment of this nature.
Okay, final question. Will Council staff and councillors write to the State Energy Minister requesting 3.1, a rapid transition away from gas statewide; 3.2, the equitable planned retirement of the gas network; and 3.3, an expansion of the energy upgrade program to help us switch off the gas forever? Response from General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through the Mayor, Council has not made any resolutions in relation to these issues.
Thank you. All right, that ends question time. Thank you. I note that we have not received any petitions or joint letters. Are there any declarations of interest? No, there are no declarations of interest. Okay, confirmations Confirmation of minutes. I propose that we move to confirm the minutes from the council meeting held on the 15th of December 2021 and confirm the minutes from the special council meeting held on the 2nd of Feb 2022. Do I have a mover? Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'm prepared to move them with an amendment to both of the minutes which reflect the officer recommendation, where the original officer recommendation, where that was changed by a subsequent officer recommendation. And the wording of the resolution to record that in the minutes is on the screen.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Potter. Is it to be opposed? No. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Okay, now we move to item 10.1, notice of intention to sell 69 McLaughlin Street, Apollo Bay, known as the Apollo Bay Preschool. The purpose of this report is to present the submissions received as a result of the Notice of Intention to Sell property process, Section 114 of the Local Government Act 2020, for consideration. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Colston.
Sorry, I'd just like to flag I've got an alternate motion. Thank you.
Councillor Hart, Councillor Colston has a motion to move. Are there any other questions of officers? No. Okay, Councillor Colston, is your motion up on the screen? Okay, it's up on the screen. We can see it there. The items added in blue. Is there a seconder to that motion?
Sorry, Mayor. I had some discussions with councillors just before, and I'd like to change a couple of words if I could.
Okay.
So in point 5, could we, after the word resolves, could we put in principle? Thank you. And there seems to be some discomfort with 2 point... Should that be 1.2 and 1.3? Yeah. So what's shown there, okay, whoops. So what's shown there as 1.2 and 1.3, which thanks the community and thanks the preschool committee. If we could delete that, thank you. 1.2 and 1.3.
And Councillor Hart, the seconder? Is it to be opposed? No, Councillor Potter. Councillor Colston is the mover.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm proposing this alternative recommendation to respond appropriately to those who made submissions and to recognise what the community has done and the preschool has done for the community. So thank you to everyone who made a written submission and to all those who contacted me over the last week. We know the Apollo Bay community has a long history of passion and self-reliance when it comes to providing services and infrastructure that it needs to grow as a community. But perhaps none of the community's efforts eclipse the huge effort that it's put in to build and operate a preschool and host Shire of Otway's first infant welfare centre. The preschool committee has kept meticulous records of its minutes and correspondence, and that's part of it here. It goes back to 1953, 69 years ago. It documents the first public meeting and the huge number of fundraising activities, working bees, and a long list of donations from individuals, families, businesses, Great Ocean Road Health, Foreshore Carnival, Lions Clubs, CFA and many, many more, including the local police who organised the replacement of the asbestos roof in 1989. The committee purchased 69 McLaughlin Street in 1956. Its decision to transfer the land to the Shire of Otway in 1958 should be especially commended. It was a selfless decision made by the committee after a public meeting so that they could apply for a dual purpose grant which would allow it to host the infant welfare service in the same building. The committee could have applied for a smaller grant just for the kindergarten, but it didn't. It wouldn't have needed to transfer the land to the Shire if it did that. But it elected to put the pressing needs of Apollo Bay's 0 to 2-year-olds, 0 to 2-year-olds, above its continued ownership of the land. Shire of Otway oversaw the building work but didn't make any other contribution to the building. Several committee members went guarantor for a loan to make up the substantial funding shortfall. Council minutes and correspondence through 1958 show that Council made it very clear to the committee that the committee was expected to pay for all future maintenance. Fortunately, that changed a little over the years with Councillor Shire Otway providing some support. The first kindergarten session within the new building was held in February 1959, and you might think the rest is history, except that it wasn't. It was really just the start of a long, endless round of fundraising and working bees to maintain and upgrade the building over the next 69 years. It's unlikely there are many people in Apollo Bay who have not been contributed to or benefited in some way from the preschool. Council can continue the community's good work by using the sale proceeds for projects and programs that support early years children and their parents in Apollo Bay, and that's what this alternative motion is proposing. So councillors, point 3 recommends that we sell 69 McLaughlin Street, subject to price and conditions being satisfactory to council, and point 4 provides officers with some guidance on how we'd like the sale proceeds to be spent. So I urge you to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hart is the seconder.
Yeah, I'll reserve. Thanks, Mayor.
Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Look, I do support part of this alternative motion, and that is the parts in relation to agreeing to sell the property. We have to honour a commitment we made some time ago, where council contributed some money to construction of a new kinder, and the only way we could afford to make that contribution was to, down the track, agree to sell this property and return that contribution to the new kinder back into the budget. Once we make that sale, I would imagine that we'll have some money left over, and then it becomes a matter of discussion as to what should happen to that money. I do agree in principle that that money should be used in Apollo Bay. I think that would be an unusual step, but the community owned that land. They've given it to council, and I think it would be fair to consider returning that money to a community project in Apollo Bay. I'm not ready to make any sort of commitment as to what that project is, and really I do strongly support achieving an affordable and key worker housing outcome potentially on that site and in Apollo Bay. And I know the submission from Mr Bob Knowles from the Chamber of Commerce in relation to that aim, and it may well be that some profit from the sale of this land may be needed to further a project along those lines, which is a critical project in Apollo Bay. So in principle, I support that money being kept in Apollo Bay, as I said, subject to discussion with other councillors, and I know our budget is very tight and we could use that money perhaps elsewhere. But right now I'm not ready to commit as to what that money should go to, and therefore I support only part of this alternative motion, and I can't support all of it, so I'll have to vote against it.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Oh, Councillor White.
Thanks, through you, Mayor. I've got to support the motion. I think Councillor Colston has demonstrated the strength and depth of the community's commitment to early years in the preschool over many, many years, and as such should be recognised and commended for their efforts. I do support, in this instance, the proceeds going back into the community. I do have some sympathy with what Councillor Potter is putting forward, in that maybe it should have a broader thought about how those proceeds are used, whereas in this motion we've got specifically around early years and children. So I'm still thinking whether or not we need to be that specific, but I'd certainly support the proceeds going back into the community and to benefit the community of Apollo Bay that have so demonstrated a commitment over many, many years to those sorts of projects in their community.
Councillor McCracken.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I'm probably along the lines of Councillor Potter on this one. I firstly would like to thank the submitters as well. There's certainly a lot of feeling about this place, and understandably because of its history. But the fourth point there in the resolution is really where I stumble. For me, I think if you're going to look about quarantining funds, and which we have done before, I think it's probably fair that all councillors have a say in that, rather than one councillor having a say, and then, I think it needs to be a bit more broader than that. So I appreciate that Councillor Colston wants to put it into a very specific area of early years children for Apollo Bay, but there might be other needs in Apollo Bay that are equally as deserving of consideration. And dare I say it, maybe even there are other areas in the Shire that might be equally deserving of consideration as well. And to be able to have that full discussion, I think, is something that we should all be able to have together and work in partnership to be able to come up with the best solution. It might be the case that some of the outcomes that are supported in Apollo Bay may not actually be in Apollo Bay. So we might need to consider that as well. So for those reasons, I don't think I can support this particular resolution as much as the project. I do support selling the land.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Colston, for putting this motion together. I think it goes a fair way to giving a really strong, promotion for what the proceeds of this sale can achieve, and I do fundamentally agree with that. I'm probably echoing the thoughts of Councillor Potter in terms of point number 4. I think you do achieve the community benefit down in Apollo Bay under the arrangements of the contribution to the early years. What I don't think you may achieve is a net benefit to the broader community of the Shire. And as Councillor McCracken mentioned, I think there's a discussion around that we can still have that may give other opportunities more broadly around the Shire. So, although of course I support the sale, I've made that pretty clear, of the property, and I support the contribution to the early years, as we have already discussed in 2021, but I think there's a greater conversation around what we can do with the balance from the sale. So I won't be supporting this motion.
Okay, Councillor Hart, you reserved.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. Mayor, I'd like to thank and acknowledge the foresight and the work of the committee over many decades, as described by Councillor Colston just earlier on. I'd also like to thank the people who made submissions to this process. What we're considering today is whether or not we intend to sell this particular property. It's not deciding who it might be sold to or for what price. I was a bit concerned, Mayor, that some of the responses to the submissions were a bit unhelpful and dismissive. There was particularly one that talked about perhaps some of the land being used for a car park, and there's many services nearby, the health service, the library, the community house, for example, and the senior citizens is not that far away in Whelan Street. It's understandable why that suggestion would have been made, and I think the response to the submissions could have reflected that. However, Council has committed part of the proceeds, $353,000, to the maternal and child health component of the new Apollo Bay Early Years Hub. So I support this resolution. I support that the intent is to sell this property subject to satisfactory conditions and price. I also will be supporting this resolution particularly because of point 4 that seeks to recognise how the funding and how the property came to exist to be able to be sold, that funding go to Apollo Bay as described in point 4. I'd also, I would hope that councillors would recognise that history and support this resolution with that recognition. But I would foreshadow that if this motion is lost, that I have an alternative resolution.
Councillor Colston, you have a right of reply.
Thank you, Mayor. I've listened carefully to the arguments. I'm disappointed that Councillor McCracken thinks it's one councillor's proposal here. It's not one councillor's proposal, and I wish he'd stop saying that. The preschool committee's long-term, nothing in this proposal negates or stops investment in the early years hub. In fact, it allows it, and it allows investment in childcare. Preschool's long-term vision was to locate kindergarten, childcare and maternal and child health all in the one location in the early years hub. A one-stop shop, if you like, to make life easier for children and parents and to allow multi-use of the space, such as using kindergarten space for after-hours childcare. The committee was fundraising to realise that vision right up to the state government's announcement to build a 3 and 4 year old kinder on education department land. And the committee has generously donated that substantial building fund it had to the current not-for-profit kindergarten operator. So it's only fitting that council commits in principle to use part of the sale to fund the new maternal and child health centre in the Apollo Bay Early Years Hub, and this alternate motion allows that. But childcare is the missing link, and the remainder of the sale proceeds could be used for that purpose. But I've left it a little bit open so that we can look at other projects that might emerge that benefit early years children in Apollo Bay, because that was the intent of the community in its public meetings way back in 54 and 56, and the intent of this preschool committee all the way along. So again, point 3 recommends we sell, which I think everyone agrees with, subject to certain conditions there. And point 4 simply provides some guidance, and I really can't understand some councillors' reticence in this matter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillors, I will now call for a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The item has been defeated 3-4. Councillors, I'll now call for a division. All those in favour? Councillor Colston, Councillor White, Councillor Hart. All those against? Councillor Potter, Councillor McCracken, Councillor Bell, Councillor Hanson. Councillor Hart, you flagged you had a motion?
Yes, Mayor. Hopefully it'll come up on the screen in a minute. It is very similar to the officer recommendation, but it has an extra clause, which is that notes that when council considers any offer of purchase, acceptance will be subject to the sale price and conditions to the satisfaction of being to the satisfaction of council. I think it probably needs the word being in there. It's up on the screen now, Mayor.
So Councillor Hart is the mover. Is there a seconder? Councillor Potter, is it to be opposed? No. Councillor Hart as the mover. Are you opposed? No. Councillor Colston is proposing an amendment. What is that amendment?
To add an additional point which says council agrees in principle to commit the sale proceeds to the maternal and child health service in the early years hub, and any surplus funds go towards childcare in the same building, early years hub. Thank you. So words to that effect.
Words to that effect that are similar to the previous motion, which has just been defeated, and I think is in contrast to this motion. So I'm disallowing the amendment. Councillor Colston.
I'd like to propose another amendment, if I could, that Council determines the method of sale and allocation of sale proceeds at a future meeting of Council that will be held in Apollo Bay.
That's an amendment to point 3. Oh, okay. The council. So that, yes, okay. An amendment. So it's really just adding in Apollo Bay to the end of point 3. Is there a seconder to that amendment? There's no seconder to that amendment. That's lapsed. So we move to Councillor Hart's motion to be seconded by Councillor Potter. Is it to be opposed? No. Councillor Hart is the mover.
Thanks, Mayor. I think I'll try not to talk too long. I think this is meeting the requirements, having heard the various submissions, to make a decision to sell the property, obviously subject to satisfactory conditions and price. I just want to clarify, in relation to the amendment that lapsed for want of a seconder, my understanding is the move of the original motion, I can't second it. So I just want to make it crystal clear that I can see that the amendment had merit and was worthy of consideration, but obviously as the mover of the motion, I couldn't second it. You would have ruled me out of order if I tried to, Mayor, which is fine. So that's it for the moment.
Councillor Potter is the seconder.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. Look, we have to, as I've said previously, honour our intent to sell this property. I look forward to the outcome and hopefully achieving a good community benefit for Apollo Bay in the long run. Look forward to discussion with councillors about that. And I was of mind to support having that discussion at Apollo Bay, but because we only have a couple of meetings in Apollo Bay, I didn't want to hold up that discussion by just saying, no, we've got to wait till March next year for the meeting. So I understand why you would want Apollo Bay presence or the ability to watch and listen to that discussion. You can do that online though, but I didn't want to hold the process up. So let's get the sale underway, and I look forward to the next bit.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Colston.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Potter, it wouldn't have been March next year before the next meeting in Apollo Bay. It could have been our next meeting. We resolved to hold 2 meetings a year, or it might have been 3, I'm not sure, in Apollo Bay, particularly when there was an Apollo Bay issue on the agenda, and this falls into that category. So I'm not sure what you're scared of down at Apollo Bay, councillors, but it would
Point
be
of order,
to...
Well, I can't speak for other councillors. I'm not scared of anything in Apollo Bay, and I welcome a discussion. And the sale process could take months. So rules out next month for a start.
Okay. Yep. Thank you. Let's keep it
withdraw that comment.
respectful.
I'd like to continue on and just say having a meeting in Apollo Bay allows the residents of Apollo Bay to come to the council meeting and ask questions. they don't have that opportunity to come to Apollo Bay. It's a 2-hour journey, an hour here and an hour back. So surely we could have agreed to have that meeting in Apollo Bay.
Okay, just note, councillors, we are discussing the motion. Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to say, look, I'm not particularly scared of Apollo Bay either, in any way, shape or form, but I was pretty favourable to one of the original iterations of this motion or the recommendation. I was happy enough to look at other options. All of them had merit. I think this one potentially strengthens the first one that was brought to us a little bit, strikes a pretty good balance. I think we owe it to the community broadly to consider all available funding to not just one segment of the community such as Apollo Bay. That's not to say, however, that money may not be or will not be directed down to Apollo Bay. It's quite possible, but I think, as I said earlier, there's a conversation to be had around that. I think this allows us to do that, so I'll be supportive of this one.
Thank you. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor McCracken.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I'm happy to support this one as well. I think it's quite an exciting opportunity to see what might come of this piece of land, and I hope that we can maximise the benefit. I note that at a future point in time we'll be determining the way that we effectively sell this, and I think it's great that all councillors will have a say in where those proceeds might go, which is as it should be. I thank Councillor Hart for making the inclusion there and working with officers to do so, because I think it makes it crystal clear that any offer that is put must be accepted at the satisfaction of council, which I don't think was made particularly clear in the first one. So that sends a very clear signal to the community that it's councillors that will be considering this, and it's not delegated to an officer. So good inclusion, Councillor Hart, and I look forward to seeing some progress on this.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? I just might quickly say a few words that I'd like to thank the community for their submissions, and I'd like to thank all the community and the Kinder Committee over many decades for the work that they've put in to that Kinder, keeping it going, probably all the working bees that they've had here. A Kinder can never really operate well without a strong committee and parents committing many, many years to it. And who I'd also like to thank are the community and officers over years that have recognised that the Kinder had run out of puff, that it wasn't the space for a growing community, or it needed a new facility. And I think councillors, council officers and the community over many, many years advocated for a new Kinder and a new infant welfare centre, and now Apollo Bay has been really successful in that, and that has been a Shire-wide effort to try and get that up. An enormous amount of effort from this organisation, from councillors over the years, to lobby and advocate for that fantastic facility that is the best facility in the whole Shire. It's a beautiful building, it's a beautiful facility, and it's the best we have in the Shire. But to do that, part of that process was their commitment to the sale of the kindergarten. That was how we were going to fund our contribution to it, and I support that. That's why I support the sale of the old kindergarten, but I'd like to keep options open about what we might do with any excess funds that we might have. There's been discussion about potentially, childcare, potentially going into early years, or, community housing or affordable housing has also been mentioned, and I'd like to also keep that open. So I much prefer this more open motion of Councillor Hart's, and I thank him for moving it. Councillor Hart, Councillor Colston, have you heard?
I'm not sure whether we should do this before we vote or not, but the first amendment I proposed is misworded there. It was for projects it was for maternal and child health services and childcare in the early years hub. So it was a different wording. So was to, the motion I spoke to, the amendment I spoke to was to resolve in principle to quarantine the sale proceeds for maternal and child health service and childcare in the early years hub. Just to get it right for the record, thank you.
Thank you. I think all councillors have spoken. Is that right? Okay, councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Let's make sure we've got that right before we move on.
Childcare. Thank you.
Okay, now we move to item 10.2, the Forest Caravan Park lease. The purpose of this report is for Council to consider to grant a lease for the Forest Caravan Park following an expression of interest process. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'd like to flag that I've got a couple of alternatives up my sleeve. But apart from that, the question is, if we approve this lease, will the lease document be available to the public?
Through you, Mayor. There's a disclosure clause in the lease, which means that the lease is confidential, but certainly the key terms of the lease, as per the expression of interest document that is a public document, can be made available to the public.
Did you have a follow-up question?
It's on the same path, Mayor, thanks. So the conditions, particularly around the use of the common, which is as you know, of great interest to the people of Forest, will those conditions be in the part that is disclosed to the public if they want it to have a look at it?
Through the Mayor. So just reiterating, the lease itself wouldn't be made public, but the key terms that are detailed in the expression of interest document, that is certainly a public document. And I guess you may consider putting something in your motion that says that the use of the common, as detailed in the lease, would be made public to public.
Thank you. Councillor Colston.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm wondering if we know what camp fees, what the tariffs are going to be for next Christmas and next Easter if we award the lease.
Through the Mayor, in the submission by Belgravia, there was an initial pricing point, and that is subject to change in the future.
As I understand it, they proposed dynamic pricing for Christmas and Easter, but gave no indication of the parameters around dynamic pricing.
Through the Mayor, I'm afraid we can't answer that because it's in the confidential attachment to this report.
So, am I correct in assuming that the answer is we don't know what the tariffs are going to be next Christmas and next Easter?
Through the Mayor, that is correct.
Thank you. A follow-up question on the possibility of using the campground for affordable housing in some way. It's been proposed in Apollo Bay and it's been proposed down in Berrygara Shire also. Are we retaining a legal right in the lease to be able to use part of the campground for seasonal worker housing or similar sometime over the next 20 years.
Through you, Mayor, that's confidential information, but what I can say is that we have had discussions with the potential lessee about the opportunity for utilising part of the land, subject to a range of conditions, for key worker housing. That would need to be to the satisfaction of both parties.
Okay, are there any other questions of officers? Councillor McCracken.
Just a quick one. Mine's about, and I don't know if it's confidential or not, so I apologise, but when we grant this sort of lease, it's just over that certain parcel of land that's detailed in the lease. It's not over any other land like that. I know there's provisions about the common, and I think it's 8 times a year or thereabouts. But is it possible under these sort of leases that it can be extended over any other sort of land, or can the leasee make an arrangement with another landholder to conduct the business of a caravan park on anyone else's land?
Through you, Mayor, what Council is considering today is the lease of a certain parcel of land. If the potential proponent was to look at providing accommodation facilities on other land, that would be up to them. It'd be similar to any other business. But what we're considering today is just that parcel of land that is known as the caravan park and the forest common with the overflow.
Can I follow up, please? What I'm getting at, though, is that if that were the case, the standards that are in this lease would also have to be carried over into... No? Yes? So the standards, basically the provision of, hygiene facilities and those sort of things with the cap limit on, occupants and that sort of thing, that would still apply to the land that it is possibly extra leased. Is that a correct understanding or not?
Through you, Mayor, if the proponent was going to lease other land outside of council, that would need to be subject to appropriate approval, so a planning permit and the like, and that would dictate what would be required in terms of amenities and wastewater and the like. Yeah.
Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I think this was asked before in a letter, but just want to go over it again. And I apologise for asking it twice, but just in relation to the overflow to the common, that can only occur once the caravan is full. The caravan park owner can't just decide, we'll put you over there.
Yes, through the as per the EI document, it can be used at certain specified times a year, only once the leased area of the caravan park is 100% full.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Councillor Hart, you have a motion?
Yes. Mayor, it's the first motion or resolution deals with an extension of the lease for the existing lessees, and I'm just having a quick look. I think the date was going to be the few days later, Wednesday the 11th. Might just check that the 11th of May is a Wednesday. You did? Okay, good on you, Councillor McCracken. Yeah, so on that first clause it should be the 11th of May.
So, Councillor Hart, that extends the lease by just under 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yes.
My question is, I'm just looking at point 2 in that one. Family Trust except will not serve as customers at this site during the extension period. Is that new customers or customers that have a credit there? Because that's a consideration.
Mayor, I know that issue has been raised, and I'm happy to talk about this if I get a seconder, but my intent is that this extension is to just allow anything that has to be moved from the site to be vacated. So it's not my intention from this resolution to allow the business to continue to operate in that period of almost 2 weeks.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for Councillor Hart's first motion? Councillor Potter? Is it to be opposed? Councillor Colston? Councillor Hart as the mover.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll probably have some more to say if I get to move another resolution about the lease, but I think the Forest Caravan Park is a very important facility in Forest, and its importance has become even greater in recent years as Forest has developed with the brewery and mountain biking. It's a lot more high profile tourism destination now than perhaps it was some decades ago. The intent of this, and it reflects something asked by the current lessees, and I would like to start by acknowledging the contribution they've made in recent years, particularly through the difficulties of COVID, when there's been restrictions on operating a caravan park, and the on and off again restrictions of travel, and also the issue of the facilities upgrade, the toilets upgrade, which has been tied up with some discussions with the EPA. So I would like to acknowledge that the way this has had to be managed in, say, the last year or two has been difficult, and I appreciate the efforts of the current operators. The purpose of this extension, and if it's adopted, my intent is there's no extra charge for the extra couple of weeks, or not quite 2 weeks, is to give some extra time for the lessee to move any fittings or anything he has to move from the site once the business ceases to operate at the expiry of the current lease date. So it's not just to continue to operate, but it is specifically to allow things to be removed from the site. I know there may be other things raised about credits or whether you can have people coming and going, and that's not my intention from this. I would imagine that if you're moving assets, some of them large assets, it's probably not the ideal situation to be doing that with a few people camping there or something like that. So I think this is a reasonable compromise, and to provide at least some recognition of the difficulties that have occurred in the last couple of years, especially with COVID.
Councillor Potter?
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I'm happy to second this. As Councillor Hart has outlined, the current lessee indicated to councillors and the organisation too, I think, that he wanted to honour some credits for some people over the Easter and school holiday period. But if once that period expired under the current arrangements, he would have to leave, and he wanted some extra time to facilitate honouring the credits, and now he has got some extra time where there's no one in the park, and it allows him to move his equipment, buildings, whatever he needs to move before the incumbent commences, and allows him to do any tidying up or whatever that he wishes to do, and he can do that without those people that he wished to provide accommodation for. So I think this is a sensible amendment to allow that to occur and facilitate a smooth transition.
Yeah, Councillor Colston, you opposed.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I've struggled with this one. It's a good proposal. but I can't support it for two reasons at this stage, and it could change as we go along. But the lease we're providing is unique. It's unlike any other lease agreement we have, because we're effectively offering Belgravia a 20-year monopoly on camping in and around Forest. It's a monopoly because the start-up costs for a competitor are far too high and the payback period is too long. This means the operator, the proposed lessee, can set its tariffs above accepted norms and benchmarks to maximise its profits. And this might make camping unaffordable for young and low-income families. We don't even know what the tariffs are going to be next Christmas or next Easter. Secondly...
Councillor Colston, I would just note you are speaking on the second motion, which we're actually... this is the first motion that we're debating.
My apologies, sorry. Correct me where I'm at.
The first motion, which is really just about the extension of the lease.
Ah, sorry.
It's all right.
My apologies.
Do you still oppose?
Can I unoppose?
Yes, you can.
I will unoppose.
Okay. Okay. Does any other councillor wish to speak? No. Councillors, I'll call for a vote. All those in favour? Yep. The item's carried 7-0. Okay. I now, so Councillor Hart has moved the second motion.
Yes, Mayor, it's basically more or less the officer recommendation, which is to grant the lease. However, the dates in A have changed to the 16th of May, which I hope someone's checked is a Monday. That's my intent. So that obviously you can't commence the lease until the other person has completely vacated the site.
Yep, it is.
Gives a few days in between too to...
Yes.
For the officers to organise a working bee if need be.
Okay. And is it to be seconded? Councillor Potter. Is it to be opposed? Councillor Colston.
Sorry, Mayor. I've made a mistake. Write it down. I was advised to put an extra clause in, which I have here. Remember, Mr. Surin advised me on this one. And the extra clause somewhere... How's the motion start, please? Can I see the top of the motion? That council. Okay. The extra clause is that council resolves, so you need a number and then the word resolves at a minimum that the details of the use of the forest common, which forms part of the lease, will be made available to the public, and that nothing in this clause restricts greater disclosure of the document. Happy to read it again and sorry about the delay. Yeah, the use of the forest common, sorry. So I think there's a comma due after minimum. Resolves, comma, at a minimum, comma, the details of the use of the forest common will, in the lease, will be available to the public. It's in the EOI, so I don't see why it can't be. And I'm happy when we've sorted this out to listen to the wave of objections. Well, I just made it up. That council 4 resolves, comma at a minimum, yeah, that's good. It needs to be the comma after minimum, I think. The details of the use of the forest common contained in the lease will be available to the public, and nothing in this clause restricts greater disclosure of the document.
Yeah, so through the Mayor, can I just ask Councillor Hart to seek to understand at that point, please, Lyndall. Do you mean that nothing in this clause restricts greater disclosure of the document or implies greater disclosure of the document? I'm happy if you're...
Nothing in the clause restricts greater disclosure. I don't want to be told that I'm the one that restricted disclosure of everything else. So if council management decide other parts can be disclosed, then that's great. Number 4 doesn't restrict. Is that how you read it, CEO?
I was just seeking to understand the intent, and based on your response, then that wording does align to your intent.
So Councillor Hart is the mover, Councillor Potter is the seconder. Councillor Colston, you oppose. Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I would like to repeat that I thank the current lessees for all their efforts in recent years in particular. This is a very important asset to the community, and by that I mean both Forest and the wider community, particularly now that Forest is an even more attractive tourism destination and more widely known than perhaps it was 20 or more years ago. I think the EOI process has been handled quite well by the council in difficult circumstances, with COVID restricting access to the site, and we have a very good submission from a very credible firm to not only take a lease on this particular caravan park, but to improve it for the future so it'll be even more attractive for people coming into the area. The extra point, I just want to quickly touch on that. The community is rightly concerned about having access to the Forest Common and having understandings of what is allowed and what isn't allowed in the lease in terms of the use of the Forest Common, and I wanted to reiterate with that extra point that that information should be made available to the community if they request it, and I think they will. It was available in the expression of interest document. I also wanted to make it clear that it's not my intent to restrict greater disclosure. If it was up to me today, the lease would be on the website by close of business tomorrow. But I understand that that's not going to happen, and it may be that eventually someone will pursue it through FOI. None of that's resolved today. Freedom of Information Act, just in case you're not sure what FOI is, if you're listening, anyone's listening. But I think this is a great opportunity for the community and the municipality wider. This is a recreational caravan park. I don't think that we should be seeking to set what prices they charge any more than when we leased the Botanic Cafe and other buildings. We didn't try to tell the person who was leasing it what prices they will charge. It'll be a competitive marketplace, both with camping, some camping that is free camping, some camping that is in government-owned campgrounds, and again, it's a recreational park, so I think that this is an appropriate lease, and I thank everyone that's got involved in this process, made submissions, and the officers who have drafted the various documents in sometimes difficult circumstances because of the COVID restrictions on inspecting the site.
Councillor Potter.
I'll reserve, please, Mayor.
Councillor Colston.
Thanks, Mayor. Apologies for before. I was a bit flummoxed over the vote on the preceding item. And when I stopped for a coffee in Forest, I should have got a triple shot rather than a double shot. Obviously, so I'm starting to fade a bit. Sorry. Look, I did have some discussions with locals in Forest about this, and they're concerned still about two things. One, that the mums and dads, campers or low-income families, young families will be priced out of Forest. they're also concerned that the forest is going the same way as Apollo Bay, and we will need to look at seasonal worker housing in forest, and the campground is the one place that council has available to provide that. And thanks to officers for working on that clause. I appreciate their work. We haven't quite got there yet, and I'm concerned that if we do approve the lease today, that negotiation on that clause will stop. So that's a concern. But make no mistake about it, we are offering a monopoly to camping in forest. We're offering a monopoly where kids can get on their bikes and ride to the trails. Anywhere else around forest, they actually have to be driven to a forest to do that. So we're offering a monopoly service. It's unlike buying a coffee at the Botanic Gardens cafe. If you don't like the price there, you can go somewhere else. You can go down the main street. So I am concerned about monopolies and lack of pricing regulation. And it might be as simple as the leasee consulting with council on future prices. But at the moment, we don't know what the fees are going to be, even for next Christmas or Easter. Thank you.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll keep this pretty short, but I'm really excited for the opportunity that this represents in forest. Speaking only for myself, but having lived relatively close by for the last 6 years, it's been really nice to see forest grow as a community and really take the opportunities to capitalise on such a very aesthetically pleasing place. And I think what has aligned to that is that some of the infrastructure that is being able to be developed alongside that, or will be. And I think this goes a long way of adding to that, the charm that the town gives off. And I understand that there's some concerns around the length of tenure. It is a long time, but at the same time, for a town like Forest, it gives someone the confidence to come in and make a difference to what is effectively, a commercial business. So it does actually need a length of time to enable that. I just want to also acknowledge that it has been a pretty lengthy process by design. It's just the nature of the expression of interest and everything else that goes around it, and it's taken place in a pretty challenging environment with COVID-19. Obviously, there's been a couple of extensions for that reason, of not being able to get people on the ground and to have a look at the site. So I wanted to acknowledge it and thank James for the time that he's put into it. It came across his desk. He probably didn't think it was going to be as extensive and as challenging as it was, but I think he's done a really good job. So I'd like to congratulate James on his efforts, and thank you.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Potter, you reserved.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'd just like to echo what Councillor Hart said in thanking the current leasee for their term of service to the community at Forest, and support what Councillor Bell said in relation to the efforts of staff. It was a big effort. It was complicated, COVID complicated, and well done, James and the team there. If this is support, I look forward to welcoming Belgravia to Forest. I have seen previously some of their facilities, and I took a great deal of time to read over their submissions, and I note their corporate strategy, their community engagement strategy, and their environment strategy and philosophy. And I don't think they're tokenistic. I think they're real, and I think they'll serve the community very well. They did offer a pricing structure and guide. Market forces will determine the fluctuations, if any, in that. Councillors made it clear to staff that they were concerned that mum and dads and their kids would be able to camp in Forest. They were concerned that there still need to be provisions for some long-term and permanent people to reside in the caravan park. Belgravia have indicated they know all that. They're offering long-term camping and stays there. I think they'll do a good job. There was the previous caravan park operators were operators of a monopoly. We haven't introduced anything new. It's the same monopoly, but we've got different operators, and I think they'll do a very good job there, and I look forward to visiting their park in the future.
Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll probably differ with some of the comments that were made, and that's what writer replies are for, I guess, in that I don't accept that it is a monopoly. I mean, obviously they control their own prices as any business, whether this was freehold or leasehold. And the competition is the wider competition in the municipality and in Forest itself. Different accommodation types, Airbnb, in Forest itself, camping nearby, some of it government camping, some of it with few facilities, and some of it with private camping with great range of facilities, and also accommodation nearby. So whilst I accept that it may be the only park of this nature in Forest, I think the accommodation offering is varied across the municipality, and anyone who is committing to a lease like this for capital improvements is of course going to expect a high degree of options as to how they manage their particular park and what they charge. That said, I think from reading the material from this firm that they will be a good community partner, and over time people will come to see that and accept that.
Thank you. I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The item's carried 6-1. Quick break. Councillors, just want to have we'll come back at 20 to 6, 10-minute break. Oh, by the time we get back, it'll be, 22. Yeah, I am.
Are you happy now then? Yeah, but they've worn off a bit, haven't they, Stephen?
16, but it could be 17. Depends how you look at it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, councillors. Now we move to item 10.3 on the agenda, the 2022-25 rating strategy. Do councillors have any questions of officers?
Through the Mayor, I'd just like to point out there is a revised officer recommendation.
Up on the screen. Has that just added point 4?
It's changed item 1 to adopt the current categories and differentials.
Yep.
A slight change there, and then in point 4 makes reference to valuations advised by the Valuer General being taken into account prior to adoption of the strategy.
Thank you. Councillor Colston.
Thanks, Mayor. Do we have any information at all on the changes in land valuations across the various areas and categories in our municipality? For the coming rate year, I mean.
Through the Mayor, at this point in time we haven't been advised of any valuation details from the Valuer General's office.
Are we expecting significant variations?
I'm not prepared to make a call on that, Councillor.
Do our scenarios take into account changing valuations?
Our scenarios take into account the valuations as advised in January 2021.
So it doesn't, if there's a change in valuation for 22-23, it's not shown in the modelling to date.
Through the Mayor, no, it's not, because we haven't been advised of the valuations in 22-23.
So what we're putting out to the community is not is based on out-of-date data. Is that what we're saying?
Through the Mayor, it's based on the data that we have up to date at this point in time. This is a process that the Valuer General goes through every year with his valuations. They do the valuations as at a date, and that is January, and then they confirm those valuations, understanding that the Valuer General is getting data back from valuers all over the state. They confirm those valuations and they provide, I think, 4 updates. Is that correct, Paul? Yeah, 4 stages to the valuation process. And at each stage they advise us, and then they review the valuations through to the point where they get to stage 4, and they provide us with valuations signed off by the Valuer General. The Valuer General has advised us that there will be data available to council across the 2 councils across the state as at the 1st of March.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? No. Councillors, we've got a revised officer recommendation before us. Does any councillor wish to move a motion? Councillor Potter. Councillor White is the seconder. Is it to be opposed? No. Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Can I firstly thank the officers who have put in an enormous amount of work, and I think everyone can see that by the quality of the information, the charts, the graphs, and all the rest of it. And that's just what's presented to us here today. They seriously accommodated councillors in their councillors' I was going to say whims, not whims, but councillors' attempt to play around with differentials and ratios and try and ease the rate burden where they could, but maintain the budget levels and the end service to the community. And it was difficult, and I thank them for the work. I haven't been on council for a long time, but that was the highest quality stuff in relation to this area I've seen, so thank you very much for that. And Mayor, we all get it when we walk down the street, our rates are high, and you talk to people in Melbourne and they can't believe it. I don't know how to change it, but we gave it a good go when we modelled scenarios, and I know, I put up a scenario where we'll just have a flat rate for everyone, and staff said, well, this is how it looks, and they went back, this is how this looks. It was good work, and we've tried hard. At the end of the day, this is what we've come up with, and it's virtually is the status quo. We don't have the most up-to-date valuations, and I've seen some figures that property values in Apollo Bay have increased by up to 30%, Kolak 13 to 15.5%. I can't remember what I saw about the farms, but I know some of them have gone up, up to 20%. So we're expecting those sorts of increase in the valuations, but at the end of the day, this is a philosophical discussion, really. This is about a strategy and setting ourselves up for the next 4 years, and I think this is the best we can do. And again, I thank staff, and I'm interested to listen to other councillors talk on this.
Councillor White.
Thanks, through the Mayor. I was going to say exactly the same thing as Councillor Potter. For me, the way the information was presented and how the reports were presented and all the different scenarios and modelling that we were given and the different ways in which we were able to pull it apart and try and make sense of it all was really appreciated by me, particularly having, first time to get my head around how this all works and the complexities, and it is hugely complex. We all want to do the best and be as fair and equitable in how we charge rates, and, within the constraints of legislation, rate capping that is really challenging. There were so many varied options and issues to consider, and I think for me the penny dropped in the end that what a huge amount of work to really reassure us that currently what we've got is probably the best that we can have at the moment. Acknowledging that, yes, the data is a point in time, and that we're not the only council challenged by that fact, and that all councils are in that same boat, trying to get their strategies out and get things moving without the most up-to-date data. I think the reassuring thing is that in our recommendation it does take that into account, and if there's anything that really skews the data or really needs us to reconsider how we're going to go about it, we've got that ability to do that. So on that basis, I want to also thank the staff and the officers for the work they've put in. It really helped me understand and get my head around how it all works. So on that, I'd really like to support this motion.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Colston.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd also like to thank the staff for the extensive work they've done on modelling to date. It's been excellent work. I particularly like the pie charts which compare the current situation to a scenario situation, and it's been very well done and easy to understand, although there's perhaps a bit of information overload there at times. Sorry about that. A bit of information overload with all the different scenarios we modelled. I think we're 95% of the way there. I'm still concerned about changing valuations and the potential that some areas where valuations have increased will increase greatly. We know that they're going to increase greatly, will suffer rate shock, and we need to guard against rate shock. And so I'm pleased to see point 4 in there, that we will consider changes in valuations before we adopt a strategy. Thank you.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Hart and Councillor McCracken.
Thanks, Mayor. And I do echo the comments thanking the staff with all their modelling of the various scenarios put forward. What we're doing today is putting out, if this is approved, is putting out a draft strategy. So there'll be a period of comment for, I think it's 4 weeks. So the public will have an opportunity to have a comment on it, and it is basically the same as the strategy that has been in place for a number of years. I think what we need to remember with this sort of thing is, with the differentials, if you adjust one differential, you either you increase the burden for someone and reduce it for someone else. So it's not a magic pudding. No matter what you do to one differential, someone else pays and someone benefits, and that's the difficulty with this. I do just want to clarify on the discussion on the valuations, and yes, I understand that some values have gone up 20% and more than that, and we don't have the official figures, that doesn't increase the total take of rates by the council. There's a rate cap, I think it's 1.75% this year, so that will cap the total take. What the valuations do is either increase or reduce your rate burden, and it depends on how much your property went up with the average across the Shire. So I just want to give that reassurance that 20% increase in your property does not lead to a 20% increase in your rates bill. So I look forward to when this comes back with the with comments from the public, and I'd encourage the public to have a look at it and send in their comments and views on the matter. Thanks, Mayor.
Councillor McCracken? No. Any other councillor? No councillors. I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Okay, thank you. Now we move to item 10.4, the draft Berrygara Drainage and Flood Study and Planning Scheme Amendment, C116, consideration of submissions. The purpose of this report is to consider submissions received during the formal exhibition of Planning Scheme Amendment C116 Kolak, and to determine whether to forward the amendment to a planning panel for review in accordance with the requirements of the Planning and Environment Act 1987. Do councillors have any questions? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. My question relates to the peer review, and that this matter came to council, I think it was on the 8th of December or thereabouts, and we asked for the peer review to be provided to councillors, which it has been. Is that peer review available to the public if they request it? What do they have to do to get a hold of this peer review? And if it is available, does that include the colour-coded tables that have various responses to matters raised in the peer review? Will that be disclosed to the public? And who do they need to contact if they want to get that document?
Through you, Mayor, thanks for the question. The peer review that was undertaken as part of the flood study has been made available to the submitters to the amendment. So we've contacted all of the submitters and invited them to obtain a full copy of all of the documents, including the colour-coded table you're referring to. And they'll not only receive a copy of the peer review document itself, it'll be the response from the Corangamite Catchment Management Authority to that peer review, recognising that it was an iterative process undertaken as part of the development of the study to make sure that the final study outcome was the best that it could be. There's also a document that goes with that explains the process so that anyone obtaining all of those documents can understand what they all mean and how they should be interpreted. If anyone is after a copy of it that hasn't already been requested to receive one, they can contact the Strategic Planning Unit at Council.
Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. We had some submitters to this strategy, and if this is adopted tonight, I know it will go to a planning committee. Will people who may still have issues or wish to make a submission, are they able to address the planning committee? What's the procedure with that?
Through you, Mayor, the procedure from tonight is that if Council adopts this resolution, the submissions will be forwarded through to an independent panel. So Planning Panels Victoria is independent of Council, it's a statutory body. They will consider all of the written submissions, they'll call for a verbal hearing of any of the submitters, and they then form a report to Council making recommendations on how they believe we should treat those submissions, and Council will then consider that report in making a decision on the amendment.
Thanks, good answer. Thanks, Mr McNeil. We did have a submitter concerned in relation to the valuation of their property, given an increase of the overlay of their property and our rates section. We're going to have a discussion or talk about that. Are you able to shed any light on whether those discussions have taken place yet or any outcome in relation to that issue?
Through you, Mayor, I couldn't advise you what the outcome of those discussions are, but I can confirm that they have occurred.
Are there any other questions? Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion? Councillor McCracken. Move the officer recommendation. Is there a seconder? Councillor White. Is it to be opposed? Councillor McCracken is the mover. No. Councillor White? Right. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Hart. Oh, Councillor White, do you wish to speak?
Just to, again, acknowledge the work, and it is a really comprehensive and significant review, and I guess it's reassuring that the submitters will again have an opportunity to talk to the panel and put forward their concerns.
Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. I think this is an important amendment that hopes to ensure that the planning scheme more accurately reflects flooding in this particular area. I'd like to thank the submitters and particularly the people who came along and made verbal submissions in December. I think it's important that the peer review document is made available to submitters, and I understand that is now the case, and I'd encourage the submitters, if they want to make contact with the Strategic Planning Department to get those particular peer review documents. What we're doing today, if this is approved, is sending it off to an independent planning panel. I think we have reached the point where we can do that. The peer review, of course, talks to the veracity of the flood modelling, which leads to the maps, which will be in the planning scheme if this is adopted. So there is a way to go. And I'd encourage the community who have put submissions in, if they still have any concerns, to look at the options of how they can make a presentation to the planning panel. I would also hope that the council would help those people in terms of the formalities of doing that process, so that if the community has any difficulty as to what the process is to make a submission to the panel, what the forms are, who they send it to, and deadline dates, all that sort of administrative requirements. I hope the council will work with the community to help people to make their submissions so they can have their say at the panel hearing. And then once the independent panel assuming this is adopted today, independent panel will eventually make a report that comes back to council to consider.
Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I'd too like to thank staff and Jeannie for an extensive report, and thanks to Councillor Hart for pushing the issue in relation to the peer review, so we're able to have a look at that as well. And to me, one of the issues in relation to this is the condition of our creeks and waterways, and there's a reference in the report to some unnamed waterway and weed growth and lack of flow, and recently we saw down at Forest as our creeks get choked with non-native trees and reeds and so forth, the flooding that results. So I do hope down the track that there's a federal and state government commitment to cleaning up our waterways and assisting our land care groups in that regard as well. Very active group out of Berrygara do great work, but they can't do it by themselves, and I think it's about time the government stepped up and cleaned up our waterways.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? No. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Okay, now we move to item 10.5, the Planning Scheme Amendment C118, Kolak Commercial Areas Adoption of Amendment. The purpose of this report is to consider the adoption of that amendment following its public exhibition late in 2021. Do councillors have any questions? If there are no questions, Councillor McCracken is the mover. Is there a seconder? Councillor Potter. Is it to be opposed? No, Councillor McCracken is the mover. No, Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor, and I think Councillor McCracken would be inclined to say this too, but just want to thank staff for trying to clean up some red tape, ease the burden on people in the community, because this is where it stemmed from, and thank them for their work.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? No. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Okay, now we move to item 10.6, Amendment C119, Kolak Erosion Management Overlay Review. The purpose of this report is to consider the late submission received and adopt the Erosion Management Overlay Review and Amendment C119 Kolak with a minor change, and forward the amendment to the Minister for Planning for approval. Are there any questions of officers? Councillor Colston.
What was the minor change?
Through you, Mayor, the late submitter requested that the schedule to the overlay be amended so that it would currently require, as exhibited, a landslip risk assessment to be no longer than 12 months old in terms of the field assessments that are undertaken as part of that. What this change does is it means that council can consider an application where the landslide risk assessment has field assessments that have been done up to 5 years prior, as long as there's a letter from the geotechnical practitioner saying that there's been no change in the conditions of the site in that time. So the effect of that is that it just, some people take some time since they've done their technical assessment, they've engaged the consultant to do that work, but it takes them more than 12 months to lodge their planning application with the designs of their house. What this will do is allow them to retain the work that's been done previously within that 5-year period and not have to have all of that work repeated again at more cost. So it's a practical measure which should reduce the burden a little bit in terms of some applicants that take time to lodge their applications.
Thanks, Doug. That's common sense. I've been caught by that before.
Are there any other questions? Councillor McCracken will move it. Is there a seconder? Councillor Potter. Oh, Councillor McCracken is the mover. No, Councillor Potter.
Gerald, wonder why I'm continuing to speak to some of these things, but I just want to point out another good piece of work. And can I mention that over 500 properties in the Shire will be partially or fully removed from this overlay. So once again, making things easier for people in the community.
Thank you. Does any other councillor wish to speak? No, councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Okay, thank you. Okay, now we move to item 10.7, letter of support for Lake Kolak Jetty grant application. The purpose of this report is to seek Council's approval for a letter of support for a grant application by the Association of Geelong and District Angling Clubs, the Association. The Association's application is for the construction of a new jetty adjacent to the boat ramp on the main public foreshore of Lake Kolak. Do councillors have any questions? Councillor McCracken.
Can I just foreshadow that I have a motion to move on this that is different to the recommendation?
Councillor Colston.
Thank you, Mayor. Has Council's infrastructure staff looked through the estimate of 100,000? Has it been checked?
Through you, Mayor, yes, Council's infrastructure or assets and project delivery team has looked through. What they've done is provided some advice that our asset management, they've provided advice that our asset management plan proposes a fairly high level estimate of about $4,000 per square metre to replace a jetty of that ilk. So their estimate would be, at a very high level, $300,000. But they said that that is quite indicative, and we've included that in the report, only to flag to the association, which would be applying for the grant, that $100,000, which is the ceiling of the grant they're applying for, might not be enough for the project.
Was their estimate prepared by an engineer or a cost estimator or a quantity surveyor?
Through you, Mayor. So attached to the report, you'll see that an engineer has prepared some concept designs. They're still working on scoping the project. Probably as we speak, they'll be moving towards the end phase of that. But at the time of putting this report together, I don't think they had gotten to the point where it had been QS'd.
What will happen if they get a $100,000 grant and the jetty actually costs $150,000? What do we expect will happen?
Through you, Mayor, Council's been very clear with the applicant, both over the phone, via email and again in this report, that it's unlikely that Council will be in a position to financially contribute to the project. So in the event of a cost overrun, that would be up to the association to try to find the gap. We have actually also said to them, though, that we would help them try to identify other grant sources. One thing that they have noted to us is that it's their understanding that the fisheries grants are slightly more flexible than some other grants that Council typically applies to, and there may be scope in the event of cost overrun for them to go back to fisheries to see if they can increase the grant amount.
Thank you. And the asset, the jetty asset, becomes council owned, and we're responsible for future costs. And how much is that per year?
Yes, that is correct. So if the project goes ahead and is completed, the asset will be council's to maintain, manage, and at the end of its useful life, it'll be our responsibility to renew it. So our asset department has provided a high-level estimate on a $300,000 jetty, which was the quantum that they estimated this kind of jetty might cost. And based on that, it's in the vicinity of about $7,000 a year impact on the long-term financial plan.
Thank you.
Councillor Bell, have you had a question?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm sure this has been considered, but I'd just like to ask the question, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the proposed jetty will be built on the western side of the boat ramp for various reasons, and taking into account that the existing jetty is not appropriate for launching a boat or stabilising a boat at the launch. Has it been explored at all that by anyone that the boat ramp actually be moved as opposed to a jetty, given there'd probably be less aquatic damage to the construction of both?
Through you, Mayor, no, I don't believe it has been explored. It's certainly not something that Council has explored. The Lake Kolak Foreshore Management Plan indicates that the preference would be to move the jetty as opposed to the boat ramp, and the association come to us with a specific project for a jetty.
Follow-up question, yep.
Thanks, Mayor. And just a follow-up question. There's reference to some of the prevailing wind issues, and as forms part of the reason why you'd have it on the western side of the existing ramp. What's the prevailing wind? And I would have thought it was I could be wrong here, but generally it's a southwesterly, isn't it? Which would push it into the current the existing eastern jetty. Or is it out there, is it not a southwesterly? Jetty's on the eastern side. Yeah, but the proposed one's on the western side. So a prevailing wind from the southwest would push it away from the proposed jetty, but maybe the prevailing wind is not a southwesterly, is it? So that should not interfere with either, then, theoretically. Anyway.
The wind's near.
I'm happy to have a go. Through you, Mayor. I think the first thing to note, and you'll see it in the report, is that there's a recommendation that we want to engage in further discussions with the association about the location. They have proposed to do it on the west side of the boat ramp. And the reason for that is because, well, in my experience, it usually, rather than using a north-southwest, it usually comes from around Ross's Point, Corook area. That's my experience of the prevailing wind. And the way that they explained it to me was that it is preferable to have a jetty where the prevailing wind is pushing the boats up against the boat ramp, because it makes boarding and
Yeah,
pardon?
okay.
Yeah, it would do.
Yeah.
Yeah, Corook's west of the boat ramp. And the jetty's going to be built on the west side, so the prevailing winds will push the boats into the ramp.
Have you got any further questions?
Yeah, I have.
Councillor White.
Just harking back to the costs and the impact on the budget, there is a proposal that if this goes ahead, the old jetty would be removed, and so the costs of maintaining the new jetty would be offset by the costs that we currently have maintaining the old jetty. So it would be, could you comment on that, please?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. So officers have proposed within the report that if a new jetty is established, that we do remove the old jetty, which is currently on the east side of the boat ramp. If that was removed, then there would actually be a net positive effect on the long-term financial plan in the vicinity of about $2,000 a year. If it's retained, it would be a net negative result on the long-term financial plan, in that we would be maintaining an additional jetty at the cost of about $7,000 a year.
Councillor Colston.
Thanks, Mayor. And who's going to pay for the removal of the existing jetty, and when might it be removed?
Through you, Mayor. So Council has indicated that we are willing to cover the costs of the removal of the jetty at a future point in time. Our assets and project delivery team has estimated that will cost in the vicinity of $30,000 to $40,000. We would come back to Council at such a point in time when the new jetty is established and operational to seek approval and funding to undertake that removal.
Are there any further questions? Councillor McCracken, you are the mover of which motion? The one up on the screen?
Do you want me to explain what I've changed?
Yes, that would be good.
Basically what I've done is point 3 has just basically point E from the original motion, the original recommendation, I should say. My understanding, having a talk with Mr. Surin over here, is that a lot of the points that were on the original recommendation have been relayed to the the group, so it's probably not needed to have it on there. And point 4 just makes it crystal clear that we're not going to be able to contribute financially to this. It's crystal clear.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Potter. Is it to be opposed? Councillor McCracken is the mover.
I guess what we're looking at here is basically writing a letter of support. We have no guarantee that this is going to get funded. Of course, we hope that they do have success, but at this particular point in time, we're being asked to write a letter of support from when I understand the funding closes Friday. That's correct. So, look, I think on that basis, I'm prepared to, support writing the letter and, recommend it's a good project and that sort of thing. But the changes that I made from the original one, just to make it very crystal clear that we do have challenges in our budget and we are not going to be a body that supports the funding of this, capital or whatever. And that's made very, very clear in point 4 there. The third point there just makes it a bit easier to read, and I understand a lot of the points that already have been raised in the original recommendation have been already spoken about at length and emphasised to the proponents of this. So for me, it's probably unnecessary. They're already covered in the permit conditions anyway, and approvals that are needed. So it's unnecessarily and no point complicating it. So look, I hope this could actually be a very exciting opportunity if it did eventuate, and hopefully the group is successful and we have a new jetty down there. Would be pretty awesome. And depending on what happens, there's a decision to be made in the future about whether there's 2 jetties there or 1 or whatever the case might be. But that's not a decision we're deciding tonight. We're just deciding whether or not we offer a letter of support, and on that basis, I'm happy to.
Councillor Potter is the seconder.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'm pleased to second this. I just want to thank the Victorian Fisheries Authority for making a pool of money across the state for organisations such as the Association of Geelong and District Angling Clubs to tap into and improve facilities for angling and boating across the state. This will certainly improve facilities at Lake Kolak if they can pull it off. I think we've all been down there and seen an increased usage in the lake recently. It's been fantastic to see families on the beach and boats, ski boats and fishing boats out on the water. They have trouble once they launch their boats, loading the boats, getting their kids into it, getting equipment into it, and the construction of this jetty will make boating a lot more safer. It'll improve the facilities on the lake and hopefully entice more people to use that area. So I'd like to congratulate the applicants for applying for this grant. I know they've been successful many occasions in securing funding, and most of the time they deliver what they say they're going to deliver on time and on budget. I think they've done a jetty down the Aire River in our shire. They were instrumental in getting us funding for the fish gantry down the harbour after we cut it down, and I certainly hope that they can pull this project off within their budget. If they can't, they know that we're not going to contribute and perhaps they can tap into somewhere else, but I have every confidence that they'll produce what they say they're going to produce, and I think the people with the ski boats and jet skis and fishermen will be very grateful for it. I hope we don't rush into pull the old jetty down. It's serviceable. It serves a slightly different purpose to this one, and if it falls into disrepair, fair enough. But that's just my view about getting rid of that asset too quickly. And I thank the officers for their work on this, and hopefully we'll have a new asset servicing the lake users.
Yes. Councillor Colston.
This was all going okay until I just heard Councillor Potter say he hopes we don't rush into removing the existing jetty. I sort of understood that was virtually a condition of building a new jetty and taking on the operating costs of this new jetty. It was it 7,000 something? Just remind me what the annual costs were.
7,000.
7,000, which we were going to offset by pulling down the existing jetty and not having to maintain that each year. So if we keep the existing jetty, we're actually agreeing to an annual cost of over $7,000 here, an additional annual cost. I've got some concerns about that and wonder whether we could, I'm debating whether to propose an amendment, but amendments don't seem to be going too well here. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? No. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? All those against? Favour. Okay, sorry. The item's carried 7-0. Okay, now we move to item 10.8, the Great South Coast Group membership. The purpose of this report is to enable Council to consider the opportunity to become a full member of the Great South Coast Group Limited, CSCG in brackets. Do councillors have any questions? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to flag that I've got an alternative, but I'd also like to ask, through you, Mayor, if Council has any comment about the possibility of having a dispute settling procedures in the MOU for the Great South Coast, whether that's something that may be able to be achieved.
Asking council officers or councillors or council...
Oh, I'm asking you, Mayor, and you can send it wherever you wish.
Yeah, I might trust the CEO to comment on that.
So thank you, Councillor Hart, through the Mayor. So it has been noted that the governance documents of the group at this time don't include a grievance or dispute resolution process. I've had a discussion with the Secretariat of the group and just pointed that out. And I received a commitment that that was something that would be taken to the board as part of their refreshing of some governance documents in the future. Very happy to provide me that commitment, and that would happen in the next few days, I would expect.
Are there any other questions? So, Councillor Hart, you flagged that you had a motion to move. That is it the one up on the screen now? Okay.
Yeah, yes, and the last couple of words on point one make it clear that it comes back to council once that's been sorted out. Is that correct? Through you, Mayor.
I think it would have to. It would have to come back to council for a decision.
So through the Mayor, the wording in point one, which concludes with a clause in the Memorandum of Understanding to the satisfaction of council, that would be council through resolution because it's not being delegated to anyone else.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, CEO. I'm moving that.
Okay, Councillor Hart is the mover. Is there a seconder? Councillor Colston, is it to be opposed? No, Councillor Hart is the mover.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I probably should be a bit measured in what I say about this resolution. I had some reservations about joining the Great South Coast because I have memories of council being involved in this group in the past when some comments made by the then chair of the Great South Coast, and I make it clear that it's not the current people, so this is talking about a historic situation, could have undermined the duplication of the highway from Winchelsea to Kolak at a time when there were sensitive discussions going on with various political candidates, and there was an election coming up, perhaps a little bit further than the current election, but similar to the sort of discussions you as Mayor will be having in the coming months. And I don't think that was very good how that was handled, and there was no process. and it was a surprise to the council at the time that there was a person involved with Great South Coast holding the position of chair, making comments that sought to undermine a project which had been supported by Great South Coast. And there was no process to settle that. So every time someone talks about Great South Coast, to be quite honest, I get very nervous because of what has occurred in the past. And could you imagine now if we were still trying to get the highway duplicated from Winchelsea from Kolak, had the publicity that was occurring in the press influenced any politicians at that time. So fast forward to now, I'm prepared to support this resolution, but really think the issue of some dispute settling procedures which aren't in the Constitution's been altered in recent years and it still isn't there, and it isn't in the MOU. I think that any joining of Great South Coast should have some sort of safeguards so we're not in that situation again. And I repeat that I'm not talking about the current personnel of Great South Coast, but you don't know, you have to have these documents prepared for when a problem, just in case a problem does exist, and it has occurred in the past, and it would have been quite costly for this municipality if the highway wasn't duplicated from Winchelsea to Kolak. So that's the briefest background. The newspaper wants to search. It was July 2012. There were articles in the Kolak Herald at the time. So hopefully we can get this resolution and get it sorted out.
Thank you. Councillor Colston as the seconder.
Thanks, Mayor. Just a question to the CEO first. Should this be the South West Victorian Alliance that we're joining, not the Great South Coast?
The group's current constitution is the Great South Coast Group, but they are considering a change. But they haven't made any resolution yet.
Okay, thank you. The CEO and myself have been part of this group and been welcomed by this group, and it's been interesting to hear the discussion of the needs further west from Kolak. We sit on the borderline here between G21 and the Great South Coast Group. We have some different needs, but I can see the benefit of us joining. They prepared quite a nice advocacy document and have invited myself along to their advocacy meetings with politicians and generally been open and welcoming, which has been great. The advocacy document doesn't really offer much for us at this time, but if we're inside the group, I'm sure that we will be listened to for future preparations of documents. So I'm quite happy to become part of this group. I think there's great value in joining with other similar groups to be part of a collective for the greater benefit of all. Thank you. Sorry, and the other point is all the other municipalities in the group have their mayor as representative. So rather than continue my involvement, I'm very happy to see the mayor take on that role, and I hope it's not too much of a burden. But now that we've all become so used to Zoom meetings, I'm sure you'll be able to work through that. Thank you.
Councillor Bell, did you?
Thanks, Mayor. I must admit I had my head in something else. Can I just ask a couple of questions of a few people? Is that all right? Or
We have had questions. We're actually in debate now.
Okay.
You've missed that bit.
In that case, I won't worry about it then.
Okay. Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I support this resolution. I thank Councillor Hart for including the grievance resolution clause. I think that's important to have in there, and I hope we look at other groups that we're with to see if there's a similar clause. I note though the way he was talking, I don't know how enthusiastic he is about joining this group. I'm very enthusiastic, although it comes at a cost to council, and I know how tight our budget is. We're fortunate to be part of G21, but we have a lot of synergies with those shires to our west. The coastal erosion, the climate issues, the tourism traffic, the road network carrying milk tankers, log trucks and all the rest of it. We have a lot more in common with those to the west than Bannockburn and Torquay, so I think it's important to be part of this group to continue the advocacy for the region, and that leads to the flow-on positives to the Colac Otway Shire. So I'm pleased to hear, I think, around the room that this will be supported. I think that's good news.
Councillor McCracken and then Councillor White.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I'm prepared to support this because it, as the motion reads there, it's an intention to become a member subject to the appropriate grievance clause being to the satisfaction of council. Now, I do hope that that does happen and it's all well and good and we can go forward and whatever, but we've just got to be sure that, you know, that's where we're at the moment, and this resolution doesn't sign us up. It just flags our intention to sign up once something has happened. So we need to be clear about that. But the reason why I am prepared to support this too is that this is a group that does have quite a lot of synergies with our shire, and it has been said that we are on the border between basically G21 and the South West Coast there. It's true, we do have synergies with both areas, and I think it does make sense to partner up with a lot of the South West groups. What gives me some comfort from this is that it's not just a single issue group. It has quite a large remit of different issues, from agriculture, coastal management, all the way down from Glenelg Shire and now hopefully all the way up to us, roads, tourism and all the rest. So, if you're going to invest in something like this, work in a partnership, I think having more issues to go on is extremely important rather than just single issue groups, which I certainly wouldn't support. So on that basis, I'm prepared to support this motion and see what comes out of the group, and by what the CEO's comments have been, that they're likely to be some sort of dispute resolution process come about, which I welcome and I look forward to seeing before we consider this matter fully at some point in the future.
Councillor White.
Thanks, Mayor. I just want to say I also strongly support joining the Alliance. I'm a strong advocate of working in partnership, especially with our neighbouring councils. I think a lot more is to be gained when we work collaboratively and together to work for the outcomes of our general region, and I think it's really important that we do work collaboratively and work to get better outcomes in particularly more complex areas that do affect the whole of the region, not just our own municipality. So I support this.
Councillor Bell, you do want to speak? Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll be pretty brief. Through the lack of the opportunity that I had through my own fault of being able to ask a question, thanks for the clarification, Joe. Look, I'm happy to support this for now based on the fact that there is an intent part of this motion. I've still got reservations around its actual net benefit, taking into account some of the financial obligations that would be involved if we get to the point where we do vote to go into the group. I think there's plenty of existing channels that can be utilised to lobby, to partner with. We already do it pretty effectively outside of the arrangements of this particular group. Although, having said that, and I think we've been promised some additional information around what the benefits might look like and what we've achieved to date, I'm certainly happy to look at joining up at the time. But look, I've certainly got reservations, but as I said, given the intent part of this particular motion, I'm happy to support it for now.
Thank you. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Okay, now we move to item 10.9, Contract 2211, Design and Construct Pierce's Access Bridge, Apollo Bay. Do councillors have any questions? Councillor Colston.
Thank you. I've looked at this bridge and rode my bike out there past Paradise and had a look, and there's a lot of other bridges like this along the roads that are flat that I ride along. So I tend to keep to the rivers, so I see lots of bridges. So it seems to me there is potentially a lot of future cost here for these bridges, and this one I think only serves 2 properties, or is it 1 property? I'm not sure.
Through the Mayor, thank you for the question. Yes, it does service 2 properties currently, and there are a number of other bridges that service 1 or 2 properties in council's ownership.
Yeah, and it doesn't look like it's a working farm. You certainly wouldn't run a milk tanker over the bridge at the moment, and it does need replacement. But if we design a 100-year bridge for the amount that's been tendered at the moment, it's probably going to take 100 years to get that money back in rates. So I think we need to look at having some sort of policy like the Shire of Otway used to have, and I'll be proposing...
Have you got a question, or is that...
On that. Well, the question is, do we have a policy on co-contributions for these type of bridges which serve only a limited number of properties?
Through the Mayor, we don't have a policy like that right now.
And I take it there's no adjoining owner contribution for this one?
Through the Mayor, there is no contribution from the landowners on this particular project.
Thank you.
Okay, councillors. Councillor Colston, did you propose you had a motion? No. Or it was an... Not yet. Well, we've got a motion. Does any councillor wish to move the motion? You could potentially...
I'd like to move an alternate motion which includes an additional point. Thank you.
So Councillor Colston wishes to move a motion, and a motion which adds that point 6 in red.
And thank you.
And is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Potter. Just wait for them to catch up. So Councillor Colston as the mover.
Thank you, Mayor. As I said before, I've been out and looked at this bridge, and it certainly does need replacement. It's a little bit of concern that we have a number of these bridges in the future, but our practice today has been that we replace these bridges for a limited number of property owners, and there's no reason why we shouldn't continue that for this bridge. But I do think if we look back to the Shire of Otway, who used to have a policy on co-contribution, owner contributions towards these sort of bridges, and it's probably timely that we start looking at a similar sort of policy and prepare a bridge renewal, small bridge renewal policy where these bridges only serve 1 or 2 properties, particularly if these properties are not working farms or not major holiday accommodation outlets, so there's limited economic potential, limited economic benefit for us to provide these bridges. And I should have asked the question about what we expect the cost to be to replace these bridges in our asset management plan over the next 10 years or so. But I expected it to be quite a bit, so we do need to quickly get this policy up. Thank you.
Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I'm happy to support this, and I'm grateful for the inclusion of point 6. I think that's very sensible. I think this issue, though, highlights the difference between rural councils and metropolitan councils. There's a plethora of these bridges across the country areas that only serve 1 or 2 houses. a lot of these houses have been there for a long time, and people are entitled to live there and entitled to have a bridge to be able to access food and services and the rest of the community. It's not an issue that the Metropolitan Councils face. I don't think it's a problem recognised well enough by the state government that we have to fork out money for the sake of servicing one or two residents. It's difficult for us with our budgets, but we have to do it, and I'm quite pleased to support the finance to do it in this case. But I just want to draw that distinction about how hard it is for rural councils to operate, and we need more grants in relation to bridge renewal.
Thank you. Does any other councillor wish to speak? No. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Now we move to item 10.10, cost sharing for Ferrari's bridge replacement. The purpose of this report is to consider whether Colac Otway Shire should contribute to the renewal of Ferrari's bridge on the boundary with Berrygara Shire. Do councillors have any questions? Okay, Councillor McCracken.
Well, I'll just say I've got a motion that I'd like to move in relation to this matter, and it revolves around, well, basically it's a motion to defer so we can get more information about some of the points that were raised previously, so I'll leave it at that.
Is there a seconder for Councillor McCracken's motion? Councillor Potter, is it to be opposed? Councillor McCracken is the mover.
I'm hoping that we're all done questions. Yep. Basically, as we've sort of discussed prior to the meeting, that there are some points of information that would be helpful to have an extra period of time to get that information. So if it helps us make a better decision, well then, so be it. That's basically why we want to defer it.
Councillor Potter, is the seconder?
Oh, thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I certainly was seeking some more information, which may or may not be crucial to the end decision, but I appreciate that I haven't given officers time to get that information, and other councillors have similar issues, so happy to support the deferral.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'll support this resolution to defer this matter. I'd like to have a better understanding of the works that were done recently, or well, 20 years ago, but that says that the bridge gave way earlier than you would expect, and what exactly is being planned for these works. My reservation is understanding what input our council has into what the particular construction of the bridge is and its effectiveness. If we're potentially paying a significant sum of money, I think it's a legitimate thing for our council to have that understanding in terms of the viability of the bridge to the future, that a proper job is done, particularly in light of the comments on the agenda about the effectiveness of past works. Those comments are on the bottom of page 636.
Thank you. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0 for the motion. Yeah, it has been, well, it's just been over an hour, so we can have a quick break if people feel they need. Okay, now we move to item 10.11, the Quarterly Performance Report, October-December 2021. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. I've got a couple on this item. My first question relates to the capital works. As I read the report, there was approximately $20 million of capital works in the current budget. That's till 30th of June 2022, which included carryover of about $4 million. But there's expected to be about $8 million of carryover projects at 30th of June 2022 at this stage. So that's double the amount of capital works that won't be finished. Does Council have any explanation as to what's going on there, that the amount of carryover would, well, roughly double in the year?
Mr McGann.
Through the Mayor, thank you for the question. We're continuing to see substantial impacts to our delivery of capital works program relating to COVID, and that has escalated over the last 6 months. For example, now that we're living with COVID, contractors are frequently reporting staff absences, and this can cause delay to our projects. We're also seeing some really long lead times for some materials, particularly drainage components. And I guess when we look at the carryover that we're forecasting, we're taking a conservative approach. So we're forecasting only that we will finish the works that are currently contracted and that have limited risk to delivery timeframes. So works that are essentially close to being underway or underway. The carry forward amount includes projects which are also vulnerable to COVID impacts, and we're seeing that with plant and fleet, where we've made orders, but there is no guarantee that those orders will be delivered in the current financial year. So staff are working extremely hard and working smart to deliver as much of the capital works program as we can this year. And we're trying to ensure that the forecasts that we're making are conservative and realistic.
Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks for that answer. Is Council able to give an assurance that any capital works that aren't done, that the actual funds will be kept and in effect the money will be in the bank and that it won't be used for some other projects?
Oh, through the Mayor, certainly from an officer point of view, that would be our practice, and certainly we would be recommending that that projects which weren't completed this year, that funds were carried forward to next year. But ultimately, that's a decision for Council.
Councillor Hart.
Thanks for that answer. And on a slightly different topic. My understanding is that Council gave a commitment as some resolutions that we passed perhaps last year, that we're going to convert the heater for the pool at Bluewater Fitness Centre from gas to, I think, some sort of electrical heat pump system. How's that project going? Is that still going to happen? Perhaps that's one of the projects that's been held up, I don't know.
Through the Mayor, we're working through the feasibility of that project in terms of the various moving parts with it, electrical supply and capacity and so on. So we're certainly moving forward to get that to a resolution. At this stage, there are going to be issues with that project, and we just need to complete that feasibility work.
Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. Hopefully this might be the last one for a short time. On the two-way radios, I read that there's going to be a more detailed report, is how I read it, in the March quarterly report. The November agenda referred to the cash cost of the two-way radio situation of being $985,000. Is that cash cost about right? Are there significant changes likely in terms of the recording or reporting of what that matter cost, Council? Or is it just fine-tuning of the $985,000 rather than a material change?
Through the Mayor, I will take this question as a notice and I will provide further details.
Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. Just following on in relation to projects, I know you haven't got a crystal ball, but playing catch up in the next financial year, plus a new budget with with new projects, presumably. I'm not too sure how we'll go there, but do you think we'll cope and be able to play catch up reasonably well, or is these COVID-related issues still going to have a big impact?
Through the Mayor, look, you used the term crystal ball. We'll certainly be working to deliver the work that we've already got on our books. That will be challenging because I don't think that the effects of COVID will, in terms of its impact on the workforce, will go away in a hurry. We've also got an issue that we've known about since the storms last September and October, and we need to brief councillors more on this and bring some further work back. But we had a substantial number of landslides in the southern area of the Shire along the coast, and that is going to result in a significant amount of work to repair infrastructure that was damaged in those landslips. And so that's going to be as well an addition to our capital works program.
Councillor McCracken.
Thank you. Look, I've just picked it up now, and I'm sorry I haven't given any advance notice for this question, but I'm looking on page 665 of the agenda. The part that I'm looking at is theme 2, valuing the natural and built environment. It's 2.1.2, green our streets and public places. I just note there in the progress comments that the 4 candidate streets have been chosen, which are Manifold, Kolak, Corangamite and Jellybrand. I just noticed in the comments there that there's work to include tree removal and appropriate complementary species to be sourced. I would just hate to think that we are getting rid of all those beautiful trees along there and putting what might be considered complementary trees. And do you know what I'm trying to say? I don't want to get rid of those beautiful trees. What's going on there, basically? Well, I hope not, because they're good.
Yeah, so through the Mayor, no, the intention, and we probably could have expanded there. If I can give you an example, in Manifold Street, between Jellybrand and Hesse Street, there's probably in that street half the existing trees are dead. They're either dead or they're well on the way. So, for instance, in that street, the intention will be to get rid of that dead stock and put in new stock. But the intention is not, unless there's a reason like power lines or so forth, we're not going to be removing healthy trees and replanting.
I was just going to ask too, when we say trees that are appropriate or complementary species, are we talking like, geez, I don't know, flowering gums? Are we talking elms? Like, I know you probably don't have the plant list right in front of you. I'm sorry to put you on the spot. But I know you know that part of the town well, and I'm just wondering what is complementary and who decides that and what are we actually going to put in there?
Through the Mayor, I'll probably take that question on notice and get some information out to councillors in the next few days.
Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Councillor White. Is there a seconder? Councillor Potter. Is it to be opposed? Councillor White as the mover.
Just briefly, Mayor, I just want to say I think it's a really well presented report. It's got 4 parts that clearly give us an update on what's happening, being the annual plan progress report, the CEO report, planning and building performance and the finance performance report. And if you really want to take the time to read these reports, it does assist us in understanding what's going on day to day, and in the spirit of transparency, it does give us a good picture of what's happening. And in the 4 key areas, and I guess we've got to keep reminding ourselves in the council plan, the key areas being a strong and resilient economy, valuing the natural and built environment, healthy and inclusive community and high performing council. It gives us a really good detailed progress report on what's happening in those areas, and enables us to pick up on things just like what Councillor McCracken picked up on, so that we can get an understanding of where it's at, and if we need more information, we can get more information. I guess it includes pretty detailed finance reports, and if people are interested in that, they're there quite clearly stating where we're at. And I guess one of the significant things that has already been noted is the carryover and the delay in the capital works, and I think that's something that we'll be keeping an eye on and hopefully resolving that over the next few years once the COVID impact has passed and we understand more why these projects are being held up. But otherwise, I just recommend the report, and if people really want to understand where we're at, I think they are good, clear indications for everybody.
Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. What I was going to say, Councillor White has said, so I'll just echo those comments and remarks, and thanks, staff, for the report, and encourage everyone to read it.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just to remind us where we are with this is a quarterly report to December 2021. I do take some comfort from the answers to questions in that the money for capital works that aren't done, the money will still be there. That is true, that is the case of what you'd expect from council. It wasn't always the case many years ago. So that's good, although it'll be interesting to see how the capital works are caught up. And I do acknowledge that obviously COVID's affected so many things in a whole range of ways. I think the community is looking for some final details of the two-way radio situation. The best we have at the moment is from an agenda in November last year that the cash cost was about $985,000. Appreciate that there may be some variation on that, but I'd be surprised if it was materially different to that, but we'll wait and see. Other thing of interest is that the numbers of planning applications received have been in the quarter have been higher than some of the previous years, and I do think that is one for us to watch, whether as there's some sort of normality comes back, that people are catching up on their various projects that they would like to do, and whether those numbers increase further. Apart from that, I just think it's worth noting that just whilst I've focused on the financials to some extent, there's a lot of information, as I think some of the other councillors have touched on, and exactly what projects council is working on. So I think it is worth having a look at, just so you know exactly what council's doing. Thanks, Mayor.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Okay, we now move on to the Community Engagement Policy, item 10.12. The purpose of this report is to consider the review of the Community Engagement Policy and its alignment to the Local Government Act 2020 governance principles. Do councillors have any questions? Councillor Hart and Councillor McCracken. Okay, Councillor McCracken will move it.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. My particular question relates to community engagement with people who are absentee ratepayers. I understand that, roughly speaking, perhaps a quarter or a third of our ratepayers are absentees. How does council engage with those people when there's something that's affecting them? And has council considered using technology so people can voluntarily sign up for perhaps email advices when there's something going on that affects their particular location?
Through you, Mayor. Yes, it's been an ongoing challenge for council because of the high proportion of absentee or non-resident ratepayers that we have, particularly in coastal areas. There's a variety of methods we use to try to reach those people, and it depends on the topic of engagement and that level of engagement that we're seeking. So for a policy like this, we would hope we'd be able to reach them via online means, knowing that a lot of them follow the likes of community Facebook pages. If you're an absentee ratepayer in Apollo Bay, you're probably following the Otway Community News or the Village Green, those kinds of things. So we do tend to try to use online mediums where we can. For other types of engagement that is absolutely essential, it might be changing their amenity or something like that, we would perhaps potentially consider things like mail-outs to their addresses wherever they live. But for this kind of project where it's a policy review that has only recently been reviewed, we would propose probably our focus would be trying to reach non-resident ratepayers via online means and also via those publications that we know they would read, such as the Otway Community News, which is issued electronically now, the Otway Light, which is issued electronically, Forest Post, those kinds of publications to try to lead them to engage in discussion with us.
Thanks, Mayor. Just to clarify, my question was more on what's reflected in community engagement as distinct from community engagement on the policy, but that's okay. Thanks for the answer.
Councillor Colston.
Thanks, Mayor. I was interested in your answer about Facebook and Otway Community News and other things, and you've been following a great deal of debates over the years on that media, and I always refer people there to contact council directly. So I'm pleased that we are monitoring to some extent what happens on Facebook, but do we keep records? Do we keep a log somewhere of the emerging community views and complaints and whatever that gets on there? And second question is, I think Stephen's onto something about an opt-in electronic information service, and many organisations have that now. So if you want to keep up to date with what's happening in the organisation, you can sign up to receive regular emails or something. Would be a good idea, and perhaps that could be considered. But yeah, I'm interested in the Facebook thing.
Through you, Mayor. I can speak to my own practice and a practice that I know is continued in the PR team to this day. When there is a hot issue, for want of a better term, there's very close monitoring of community Facebook pages. I'm a follower of those community Facebook pages myself to make sure that I can keep track of any projects that I'm involved in that might be receiving commentary. Again, when there is a lot of commentary, it's not uncommon for council officers to take copies of that to inform our work, to make sure that we know who's commenting on things and what kinds of things are being said. So yes, absolutely, it's monitored, not in a formal way, but more in an opportunistic way when we see the opportunities come up. Now, you might have to remind me of the second part of your question, sorry.
The second part was about an opt-in email service to keep up to date with what's happening when you're sitting in Melbourne, what's happening down the coast.
Through you, Mayor, that would potentially be something we could investigate with our website provider, Seamless. We could talk to our PR team to find out whether there is an opt-in button available as a module on the Seamless Open Cities kind of platform. That may be the case, and it's something we could investigate.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Councillor McCracken, you flagged that you'd move the motion. So you're moving the officer recommendation. Is there a seconder? Councillor Potter, is it to be opposed? Councillor McCracken is the mover.
Thank you. I'll be short and sweet with this one. We just note that this goes out for public comment for no less than 6 weeks. So if the community do have a chance to look at it, make sure you put your comments in and give your feedback. Thanks.
Councillor Potter. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Okay, now we move to item 10.13, traffic management in Old Coach Road, Skeens Creek. The purpose of this report is to reconfirm the location for the northern boom gate that will be installed as part of a trial to deter through traffic on Old Coach Road, Skeens Creek. Do councillors have any questions? Councillor Hart, then Councillor Colston.
Thanks, Mayor. I've got a couple. The first question is, are council officers confident that if this gate is installed at this new location, that the sensors will be such that the gate will be open by the time vehicles reach the gate if they're travelling at a modest speed of 20, 30, 40 kilometres an hour?
Through the Mayor, yes. I would think, although I wouldn't characterise 40 kilometres an hour as a modest speed on that road, but a lower speed, yes, we're confident, and that will certainly be part of the setup on site, is ensuring that it operates in that way.
Councillor Colston.
Thank you. No, I'm interested in the what happens if the gates fail, and the relationship between gravity and the weight of the gates here. So that if the battery fails, it would seem to me the gate would flop down. Have we got any information to show otherwise?
Through the Mayor, we have been working with a supplier who, on that particular point, has advised that the default position in a malfunction is open. I would have to clarify with them exactly what the internal mechanism is that ensures that that happens. But we do have a bit of a safeguard in place in that if the gate, for whatever reason, did default to a closed position during a malfunction, our South Crew Services and Operations team will be having a handover with the supplier, so they'd be the ones on call and there would be a number to call if that is the case, and they will be shown how to move the gate into an open position. So that will be part of the handover when the supplier installs the gates on site. And then the other point really is that this is a trial, and if we do see any ongoing issues with that, that would be part of the consideration about whether this becomes a permanent installation or not.
So if the gate fails and it's in a closed position, and I'm in a car, am I on a flat piece of ground or am I on a slope? Can I turn around and go back down the other way?
Through the Mayor, part of the installation of the gates is to create turnaround spaces where they don't currently exist. There's a couple of locations where some additional gravel will be put in place on the road verge so that a car could turn around. In relation to whether it's flat or not, we have instructed the gate supplier that all the gates would have a flat section at least of 4 or 5 metres so that a vehicle could pause before the gate and then make that turn if they needed to, so they won't be stuck on an incline.
Okay. Councillors, Councillor Hart.
Has council bought the gate shed and at what cost, please?
Through the Mayor, yes, we have purchased the gates. I don't have the exact cost in front of me right now, but I'm happy to supply that to councillors.
Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. I understand the gates make some sort of noise or warning noise when they're opening or shutting. Is that likely to be disturbing to nearby houses? Because I understand there is one house within about 30 or 40 metres of the gates, of the proposed location.
Through the Mayor, there is a noise that the gates can make. It can be turned off. So I believe when gates are installed in certain situations, there's sort of an alarm or a siren that happens to notify people that the gate's opening and closing, but we can have that turned off and we wouldn't be activating that in this scenario. So once that's turned off, there would be practically silent.
Any further questions? Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion? Councillor Potter, you move the recommendation?
I will, Mayor. Thanks.
Yeah. Is it to be seconded? Councillor Colston. Is it to be opposed? No, Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. Groundhog Day, deja vu, however you want to put it. 11 months ago, I moved a motion to instigate this trial. Glad to see it's happening.
Councillor Colston.
Thanks, Mayor. I think it's longer than that. I think it's about 18 months now since we first considered this, and so I won't say anything for fear of delaying it even longer.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Look, I'll reluctantly support this resolution, but I have some real concerns. I don't know why Council didn't look at whether it could have a few more solar panels on the gates on the safer location that was determined in October 2021, which was closer to the road through from Skeens Creek to Forest. That was a safer location because it's much flatter, there's more room to turn around, and it means anyone on the sealed road that was perhaps encouraged by their Google navigation to turn off down this road would see the gate and might be discouraged. This will no longer be the case. This is the third time that this matter's come to council. I hope what we've been told today is how the gate operates, that people will have, that the gate will lift by the time traffic reaches them. I'm not entirely convinced, but I could be wrong. And I also hope that larger vehicles, you know, we hear about there'll be a flat spot of 4 or 5 metres. Well, some vehicles, particularly four-wheel drive vehicles or something like that, SUVs, would probably be longer than that. So I think this is, I think the whole way this has been installed on that road is not the wisest move, but everyone seems to be happy that it's going to work. But if that's the case, how come it's come to us 3 times in 11 months? Look, I might be wrong. I have been wrong before, and I'm sure many people will remind me. But you know, good luck with it. But I'm not convinced.
Councillor White.
I guess, Stephen, to remember this is a trial, and a lot of things may or may not come as the trial progresses. I guess for me, again, like everybody else, it's been going on for a very long time, and I get a bit bemused as to why it's back and forth and back and forth. And I'm wondering whether this would be a good project to have a little bit of a review to just see where the critical points were and why there's been such a delay over the time with this project. It might just be very informative to do something like that to avert such things into the future. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that internally it might be a good thing to, I'm sure there's been a lot of navel gazing around it anyway, but it might be a smaller project that could well be informative in a review for council officers. But otherwise I support the trial going ahead.
Okay, does any other councillor wish to speak? No. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? Items carried 7-0. Okay, thank you. Now we move to item 10.14, appointment of a deputy to the Geelong Regional Library Corporation. The purpose of this report is to appoint a councillor to act as deputy to Councillor Stephen Hart on the Geelong Regional Library Corporation Board. Do councillors have any questions? Councillor McCracken.
Councillor White, are you still interested? Because if so, I'm happy to do the whole, nominate you and do the motion and that, if you're comfortable.
Any questions? Councillor McCracken, so you'll move the motion with...
Move the motion up there, but insert Councillor Margaret White.
Yep. Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Potter. Is it to be opposed? No. Councillor McCracken is the mover.
Good luck.
Councillor Potter. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks for Councillor White for accepting the nomination to Deputy. It is a little bit different to the library arrangements for the previous corporation that we would have a Deputy. Hopefully there'll be plenty of notice if Councillor White is called upon to attend a GRLC meeting, and it may well happen, because hoping that maybe in the next 12 months I might actually be able to get a holiday. Thanks, Councillor White.
Okay, does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item is carried 7-0. Okay, now we move to item 10.15, the Audit and Risk Committee minutes. 8th of December 2021. The purpose of this report is to provide for information the Colac Otway Shire Audit and Risk Committee minutes dated the 8th of December 2021. Are there any questions? Okay, councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report. Does any councillor wish to move a motion? Councillor Colston, you move the recommendation. Is it to be seconded? Councillor White, is it to be opposed? Councillor Colston is the mover. No. Councillor White? No. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Okay, now we move to item 10.16, Chief Executive Officer Report to Council, Community Asset Committee's Annual Report. The purpose of this report is to submit to Council the annual report in relation to the performance of community asset committees within the Colac Otway Shire. Do councillors have any questions? Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. My recollection is that in 2020, might have been, I think it was April 2020, we had to move a resolution to reappoint these committees because the Act was changing, and that we reappointed them to the 31st of December 2022. Does Council have a plan in place so that the elections of these various committees can take place before the 31st of December 2022, particularly keeping in mind that when we did that reappointment, it turned out that virtually every committee had had an expired term, in some cases going back over 18 months.
Through the Mayor, thank you for the question, Councillor Hart, and I recall very clearly the circumstances back when they were reappointed. I can say confidently that we have a far better finger on our pulse of our community asset committees now, but I'd also go on to say that we do need to do more work with them, training them, ensuring they understand their responsibilities and obligations, etc. It's been challenging to extract information from the committees. We are very aware of where each committee is at with regards to AGMs and election of members, etc. But I will say that we do need to do more work with them to bring them up to a level that I would be happy to tell Council that everything is running smoothly with the community asset committees.
Okay, well, do you have a follow-up question, Councillor Hart?
You've got a follow-up question. Do you want to follow up first? No? Happy for me to
Councillor
go.
White then.
Just on that, I know working with these little committees around the countryside it can be challenging, and they're all really busy people and giving their time voluntarily to keep things ticking over. But in my experience going around talking to people, I think they would really appreciate some sort of small workshopping training sessions around particular aspects of running their committees and, general governance issues to help them understand their roles and responsibilities and how they are accountable. And given that they are really busy people, but I think that would really help them. My question is there any plans to provide some of that sort of sessional type training for some of these people?
That has been the intention, but it's been very difficult with COVID to bring them on board with that. But absolutely, training is part of the plan.
Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just on that last answer and comment on re-elections, under the old Act, council would conduct a re-election every 3 years, and typically a councillor would go out and chair that re-election, and council would formally reappoint committee members. Typically, I think it was for 3 years. Has that changed? Is council now anticipating that the committee itself will conduct its election, and what will the cycle be? Surely it wouldn't be every 12 months, because I mean, by the time you by the time you go to a couple of meetings, 12 months can go very quickly. So the question is this now the responsibility of the committees, and will the term be different to 3 years?
So maybe I'll take that as the CEO. Thank you, through the Mayor. Yes, things have changed with the Local Government Act 2020, and these committees, whilst they look similar to previous committees, there actually is a different structure. The establishment of community asset committees across councils across Victoria was done quite quickly because of the legislation, and there was a real, I think, absence of support and advice in some ways. But I can very much reassure councillors and the community that in the last 12 months you can look at any council website that has a community asset committee and see a real depth of guidance and governance that is now really out there in public. And so that's why, apart from COVID, I think we're in a really good place to do really good governance training with committees in the next 12 months, which I think will be really valuable. So that matter, I think, is now well placed to really help support the committees better in relation to the structure, the simple governance. The key aspects are that the committees themselves are established by council through resolution. The members are only appointed by council through resolution. So it can't be the committee themselves, it must come to the chamber. There is no sunset requirement on those memberships, so the fact that Colac Otway Shire decided to put one on is fine, but it isn't necessary to have one. Okay? So council can consider that. We did include the previous resolution to make sure that was it's on page 788 of the agenda, so that April resolution is front and centre there. We've got that in mind, and we'll be mapping out to make sure we can bring back the topic of members well before the deadline. The reason this comes now once a year as a CEO report is because while council establishes the committees and appoints the members then have their delegations issued through instruments from the CEO, and the CEO is then responsible for making sure that governance is in place, and then report back to council once a year. So it is a bit different in that aspect also.
Councillor Colston.
Thanks, Mayor. Community assets is a pretty broad term. It's undefined in the Act. We've interpreted it to be council-owned assets, which is probably fair enough, but there are many other assets, particularly along the coast, which are on DELP land or other land, and they seem to fall between the cracks here. So there are committees of management managing those assets that aren't council assets, managing community assets that aren't council assets, and something like the Mechanics Hall in Apollo Bay springs to mind, which is located on DELP land, but it does have a committee of management. I'm wondering whether we can somehow support those committees where we don't have a formal community asset committee, but we can still support with the, in collaboration, of course, with the land owners, but to provide someone like the Mechanics Hall Institute Committee of Management, or to include it in the governance training we might provide.
So through the Mayor, I might also respond to that one, Councillor Colston. I think it's a really good point, because the practicality of us maybe having co-training sessions with community asset committees makes sense where in the one, particularly in the one town or location. a lot of the governance documents that I've seen developed for community asset committees has actually been based on DELP guidance that they have for their community asset committees. I think they've got some good guidance documents. I think sometimes it doesn't hit the ground. So whilst there might be some differences, there's also enough overlap that we can probably at least consider whether there's an opportunity to do some shared sessions, particularly when we know that a lot of these volunteers are on more than one committee as well. So.
Okay, are there any further questions? Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this? Councillor Potter. Councillor McCracken is the seconder. As the seconder. Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I was pretty interested in reading this report. Thank you, CEO. I know you have to do it, but it's very interesting, the information contained in there, to see how these committees have operated or not operated across the last 12 months due to the impact of COVID. So I found it very, as I said, interesting and stimulating to read. Endorse the comments in relation to some governance training, and I was heartened to hear Mr. Lawrence has got that front and centre on his radar. That's great. And finally, I just wanted to thank the committee members for undertaking their role on behalf of the rest of the community. They perform a very important function, and I hope they'll continue on and COVID eases and they can be more effective in doing what they do.
Councillor McCracken. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I do want to echo what Councillor Potter said about thanking the people on these various committees. There are a couple who haven't reported. I don't think that there was any ill intent there. I think there was perhaps just a little bit of confusion as to what was required or when it was required. I think when you look through this, you can see, as Councillor Potter said, a lot of committees of halls and what have you have been affected by COVID limitations. I think it's worth just keeping in mind that it's just an unfortunate coincidence that you had a significant change in the Local Government Act and the COVID-19 pandemic, and they both happened at virtually the same time. So I just think we need to keep that in mind as we move on with these particular committees for the future.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Thank you. Now we move to item 10.17, revocation of authorised officers under the Planning and Environment Act. The purpose of this report is to revoke the instruments of appointment and authorisation for Jacinta Langdon and Gray Bowden, who are no longer employed by council. Do councillors have any questions? Councillor McCracken move the motion. Councillor Colston seconder. Okay, is it to be opposed? Councillor McCracken. Councillor Colston. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? Items carried 7-0. Okay, now we move to item 10.18, report of informal meetings of councillors. Please note that the purpose of this item is to report the informal meetings of councillors and does not require a council decision. Thank you, councillors. Okay, moving to closed session. Ladies and gentlemen, the remaining items for the consideration of council are to be heard in closed session. Councillors, we have a recommendation before us that pursuant to the provisions of section 66 of the Local Government Act 2020, the meeting be closed to the public and council move into closed session in order to deal with minutes of the closed session council meeting held on the 27th of October 2021 under the Local Government Act 2020 section 31A on the basis that this matter deals with the council business information being information that would prejudice the council's position in commercial negotiations if prematurely released under section 31F on the basis that this matter deals with personal information being information which if released would result in the unreasonable disclosure of information about any person or their affairs. And item 2, the Community Award Nominations 2022 under the Local Government Act 2020, Section 31F, on the basis that this matter deals with personal information, being information which, if released, would result in the unreasonable disclosure of information about any person or their personal affairs. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this? Councillor Potter, is it to be seconded? Councillor Colston, is it to be opposed? No. Does any councillor wish to speak? I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. This concludes the open part of this month's council meeting. Thank you for joining us via the live stream. The meeting will now be closed to the public to allow for the hearing of the closed session items on the agenda, and for this reason the live stream will now cease. Thank you.